well, this meeting, sorry. Listen, the first thing I was going to say, because of the bereavement that happened last time, I would ask if we could have a minute's silence for Councillor Brown, if that's okay. Okay, thanks everybody for that. Right, and we'll move on to item number 1, which is Sederunt and Apologies. Carol, do you have any apologies, please?
Thank you. If I confirm that I have apologies from Councillor Carson, Councillor Collins, and also the leader, Councillor Hislop. Not present at the start of the meeting are Councillor Martin, Councillor Diggle, and obviously we now have Councillor Ogilvie joining the committee.
Okay, thanks for that. And welcome, Councillor Ogilvie, to the Plan House Environment Service Committee. I think Graham, and I take it that Graham Foster and Jim Dempster just left. Oh, there. Okay, right. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, item number 2 is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Wood?
Just clarification, as Vice Chair of DG First with item 10, to take governance that there are no points of interest there I should be declaring.
Thank you. I'd have to advise the member, it's a good question to put, members should always consider their positions in respect of issues like this. However, in respect of commissioning and delivery and the arrangements put forward by the Council, there is nothing to prevent one member being a member of both a committee that's commissioning and also a member that's delivering, an organisation that's delivering or a committee that's delivering. So there is no interest that would require you to leave this committee.
Councillor Wood?
Yes, just to come back, and if you could just note that I am on DG First and I will be continuing to stay in. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Geddes?
Thanks, Chairman. Can I say so? There's reference made to Swestrans in item 5 of the papers. I happen to be a director of Swestrans. I would like that noted. It's not. I don't feel that I have any interest to declare, and it does not interfere in any way with my right to consider this item. But as I say, I would like it, with your leave, noted nonetheless.
Yep. I'll bring in Councillor Mail first because I think it's on the same.
Exactly the same issue in the same conclusion.
And if you could pick up on that for myself as well, please, Carol. Councillor Peacock?
Chair, just the same as Councillor Wood, being a member of DG First Committee, so just have that note.
Okay, thanks for that. At this point, maybe a wee bit of clarity from the clerk as well. But as far as I'm aware, this meeting will be recorded and will be available afterwards. I think you've maybe got something to refer to, please.
Thank you. Just to confirm that the protocol that was agreed in respect of public speaking by the Council leaves the decision for the committee. In respect of recording of the meeting, I can confirm that I've been advised that the technology has now been proven through testing and we now are able to have the capacity to record, and that recording will subsequently be made available for public listening. So just unless there is any disagreement amongst members of this committee, the intent would be there will now be a record switch, got the nod, and that particular recording of the meeting will then be available for public listening.
Councillor Lever?
Whereabouts on the council website will the public be able to access this? Because obviously it would be sensible to have it in the same place as the minutes of the meeting, so they can just click on there as well.
Thank you. I hate to admit I've got no idea, but I've heard the question and I will ensure that members are advised of where the recording will be made available.
suppose we could send that to all 47 members. Because
Yeah, can I just come back? I
precedent.
think
Yeah.
it's important that the public knows, not just the members know where. So that's why I'm saying that, given that you've got the committee papers, the agenda, the minutes, then the recording should all be linked together.
Thank you. I think that the point's well made. We'll ensure that it's like all things, information is only accessible if people know where it is. So the important thing will be to ensure that there is a clear path from the internet and the extranet to these recordings.
Okay, thanks for that, Carol. Anybody else got any other questions regarding the recording? We're okay with that. Item number 3 is been to full council. It's been agreed and ratified, so it's only here for noting. So we'll move on to item number 4, which is minute of the Housing Subcommittee meeting of 25th of December. Do we have any questions on that, or do we see it as being a true reflection? I wasn't at that meeting, so I can't comment. Councillor Geddes?
I would move it, sir, as a correct record of the business transaction. Excuse me.
Thanks for that, and Councillor Mail seconded that. Carol, I think. Excuse me. Item number 5, which is financial items. We have a Planning and Environment Services activity-based budgeting report by the Director of Planning and Environment Services. I think, Alistair, you've got a presentation to do on this, then we'll take questions thereafter.
Thank you, Chair. A very short presentation. A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This report provides members with details of the Planning and Environment Services 2012-13 activity-based budgeting information. The information provided for the following 2 years is on an indicative basis only. I will now give a brief summary of the document itself. It opens with an introduction advising of the Department's gross expenditure budget of 35.38 million. Staff costs of 8.42 million represent 24% of the gross budget, and the waste PFI payments, for example, 10.69 million, represent 30% of the gross budget. The service also generates income through grants, fees and charges of some £4.78 million a year, and charges for planning applications and building warrants constitute a significant element of that income. Page 28 indicates the whole budget for the department, and once all elements are taken into consideration, the net controllable budget is 30.6 million. Thereafter, the document details each of the discrete businesses within Planning and Environment Services, detailing what the service is about, the way it is delivered, including resource details, key outputs, and benchmarking. The budgets in each of these service areas are also broken down into activities carried out by that service. Each of the budgets associated with each service is then detailed on an expenditure and activity basis. Finally, there is an analysis of payments to other bodies for 12-13, and Appendix 2 sets out the budget process and timetable as agreed at the full council on the 23rd of August 2012. The information presented today is for noting and is provided to enable members the fullest scrutiny of the Planning and Environment Services budget, to assist members and political groups in developing their budget proposals for 2013-14 and the following 2 years. Should members wish further information in detail, that should be handled through requests from political groups to the Directorate. The Departmental Management team I have here today, and they will be delighted to field any general questions, and these should be directed to the appropriate head of service, and I will attempt to deal with corporate and departmental issues. We have along Martin Taylor today, who is substituting for John Lynch, who is on annual leave. So, Chair, that's all I want to say at this stage. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Alistair. Graham, Councillor Foster, you're first.
I'll put the water back down just now. It's just clarification. Page 60, fourth last item. This is the grants being given, monies being given for next year. Drumore Harbour, £5,000. Now, I'll be honest, I only gave the director the letter outside the building before we met this morning, but I was given a letter from a director, sent by a director of Drumore Harbour Trust to Galloway Static Gear Association. In that letter, his last paragraph quite clearly states This £5,000 is to be used for dredging and equates Steel Estates, Slaven as our chosen contract, in my understanding. It is not for any director of any trust to decide where it goes. Could I have a guarantee that proper procurement will be exercised when this £5,000 is spent?
Chair, if I could answer that, I can assure members and guarantee that that will be the case. I find the letter strange because to do any form require a licence, and there is not a licence available to that particular organisation to carry that out.
Just if I could come back briefly, Chair, and to put it in simple terms so that I can retain what I'm being told, it is not for the directors of the Harbour Trust to award the contract. It will go through proper procurement exercise and it will be awarded in a proper fashion, not for one person to pick a preferred person.
I can confirm that that is the case.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Lever?
Just page 58 of 342 or page 32, the trading standards cost. Is any reason why Dumfries and Galloway Council is 70% higher than the Scottish average in terms of the per capita expenditure? Because I'm not preempting the budget programme, but if we could if we were at the Scottish average, that would be a saving of something like £400,000.
Did you manage to pick up that? Did you pick up all that question there?
Yes. Chair, apologies, I'm not going to be able to answer the member's question. I can't offer an explanation for our colleagues in trading standards, but I'm happy to take the question and come back to inform all members.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Smith?
Thanks, Chair. It's on page 32. There's reference in Business and Enterprise to Business Gateway and the financial assistance to small business scheme. Obviously, we've now got responsibility for that. Do we have the authority to actually change the criteria for the financial assistance to small business scheme? Obviously, it was previously Scottish Enterprise, but now that we run that scheme, presumably we've got the right to actually change that criteria. On page 33, there's reference to countryside services delivered by the service's own staff complement of one. Is it only one? Is that correct? Well, I've got a couple of other questions, but I don't know if you want to take each sort of department one at a time, or do you want to go through all the questions?
I think probably one department at a time is okay.
Okay, we'll do the economic development first.
Thank you. Just the last one first. That's an error. It should be a staff complement of 10 in the countryside team. And with reference to the financial assistance small business scheme, that's a council-run scheme, and it was approved by council. So it's well within the remit of this committee to recommend changes to it and recommend that to full council. It came out of the economic action plan, so I suspect a change would have to go there, but there's no reason why we can't recommend changes.
Thanks for that. Councillor Smith, you want to come back with?
That's fine. I just thought there had been a cut of 9 people that we hadn't noticed before that. I'm pleased to hear that there hasn't been. Just one other on the economic development one as well. I'm kind of conscious we're probably going to discuss this when it comes to the business plan, but on page 35, the target this year was to create 450 new start-up businesses. Obviously, later on in the papers, we're going to be debating whether that target should be reduced to only 400, which seems quite strange, considering the fact that we achieved 554 in the financial year 2010-11. Is there any benchmarking at all takes place to determine how we actually set that particular target?
Yeah, the benchmarking is based on the government national contract, and this is the last year of a national contract, and the changes that we can talk about later are based on the new contract coming forward and tightening up on that. So it is benchmarked, and this is the last, in effect, the 10-11 and then 11-12, the current year, the last year of it.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Prentice?
Thanks, Chair. It's just, it's on page 32 again. It's actually about Lough Ken. It's a sort of funny when I was speaking to the chairman of Lough Ken Management the other day, and he was just stating the fact that they've had a letter that meetings can no longer be held in Parton Hall. They've been held in there since time began at £15 for each meeting twice a year. And they have been told by council officials that because the building is not in the ownership of the council, that the meetings of this body will have to take place in council-owned buildings. If they want any council input, Parton Hall has always hosted that particular meeting.
Thanks for that, Councillor Prentice. That's something out with, I think, what we're looking at today. But I've had reassurances. Yep. No, fair enough. We've had reassurances from Mr. Speedy that somebody will come back to you on that actual particular item. Okay, do we have any other general questions regarding item number 5? No. Okay. Oh, sorry. Councillor Geddes. Councillor Geddes, sorry.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, I most certainly do have, and it's in relation to planning and building standards. I've no doubt that we'll revisit this later on in the meeting, but there's no harm to get to get the oar in as soon as possible, in my opinion. And if you look at page 39, talking about how well the building standards section is doing. Got a 5-star rating, the only Scottish local authority to achieve this level of performance. And you go over, Chairman, to page 42, and you look at the benchmarking section, and you'll see, in fact, that sort of spending and building control is £3.18 against the Scottish average of £1.57. Now, the first question would be, presumably, the fact that we're spending, and to that extent in this service, has something to do with the grading that we've got. And secondly, if that's the case, there must come a time in relation to resourcing any service in this authority where the law of diminishing returns applies. So at the end of the day, who's responsible, as it were, for dealing with that, i.e., it starts becoming more expensive, to get increases in performance, which probably are not, you know what I'm saying, Chair. So these were the two questions, and as I say, I would like a response to that with your leave, sir.
Thanks for that. Steve, can you answer them?
Yes, certainly, Chair, through you. These details are provided through SIPFA, so they're not generated by ourselves. So I'm unable to offer a full explanation of how SIPFA arrive at that information and what they base it on. What I would say is that this information is based on 2010-11 returns, and since that date we have in fact made some quite significant reductions in expenditure within building standards, as we now call it. Within the budget, there were a number of vacancies that were being held, and those have, as part of the savings process during last year, been deleted from our establishment. And I suspect that if this exercise were to be rerun, that figure would be significantly lower than is appearing from the SIPFA information. The other, just to pick up on the other aspect of Councillor Geddes' question, all of this will be looked at as part of our department's programme of service reviews that we're committed to carrying out. I think it's referenced in the business plan that during the next year we will be carrying out much more detailed service reviews, and this is exactly the sort of information that the service reviews will address in terms of looking at how are we resourcing our different activities, and how does that compare with the resourcing that's provided within comparator local authorities.
I'm grateful, Chairman, and I'm sure that there'll be some of us will want to come back to this issue, later on in the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Lever.
I was just listening to Councillor Geddes there, reminded me about the derelict properties strategy. Are we going to make any progress on that in the near future? We set £100,000 to one side 2-3 years ago, and I don't think we've made any progress as far as I'm aware.
I think, Councillor Lever, I think we'll go back to the original, what's within the recommendations. It's used for noting. If there's any particular questions like that, I think it's what we pick up on them through our political groups, because this is for the budget process. So I think we're kind of veering a wee bit away from, I'm not trying to stifle debate in any way whatsoever. But I'd rather if we could have picked that through our own political groupings and drove that forward that way. We've got an issue with that.
With respect, Chair, the money is already sitting within the budget.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Lever. If you don't mind, I'd like to move on. So the recommendations were here to note, accept the presentation and note. Councillor Smith?
I thought we're actually taking them department by department. We've only seemed to have managed to get halfway through, and you're cutting off debate. I've got just a question on the grant to Swestrans. There's £100,000 sort of administrative grant to Swestrans. So that excludes obviously all the grant money that we give for bus stops, etc., etc. Can I just get a sort of rough outline as to what the £100,000 to Swestrans actually covers?
Absolutely. And it's, I thought you'd finish your questions, Councillor Smith. That's why I moved in. I was going to let you go through your, as you went through. Harry?
The grant to Swestrans covers, amongst other things, staff costs, payment administrative costs and payments in turn back to the council in some respects for staff assistance provided by the council at Swestrans.
So do we actually do any sort of, it's not as much benchmarking, but do we do a comparator with other local authorities in terms of the contributions they make to their transport agencies, and how does it compare?
We haven't at this point got that information. It's certainly something we can look at.
Councillor Smith? Yeah, any further questions?
Some I suppose we can pursue as a group in terms of savings options, but and the other questions I've got are actually on the payments to outside bodies later on in the report, so obviously later on in this one. Do you want me to ask these questions now?
I mean, there's no other hands up, so you're welcome to ask as many
I'm
questions.
just curious on page 60. There's £400,000 for the property investment programme. I'm just keen to get a wee bit of detail on that as well. What does that actually cover?
Yep. Did you say page 60? Whereabouts is that?
Page 60, it's got the list of, it's analysis of payments to other bodies, and there's a figure of £400,000 halfway down that goes to grants to outside bodies, goes on property investment programme. Just a wee bit of background on that.
This is a programme that was approved via a PH&E for a range of grants to improve facelift, the facelift scheme for properties in town centre. We have a draft grant programme being developed that will be completed by the end of November. Thereafter, we'll be able to start promoting it and then start dispersing the funding for that. This has slipped over the summer period due to a resource issue, but we're certainly picking this up, and that includes the work on the derelict property element as well that was combined into that programme.
So it's a facelift scheme. So that will get allocated and spent during financial year 2012-13. Because we haven't had a report. I think one of the things in the minutes of the Housing Committee was expressed at the Housing Committee that hadn't actually made any progress yet.
No, this is a 3-year programme covering this year and the next 2 financial years. And what we said we would do is get this scheme up and running, which we're committed to doing, and starting to give grants this year, and the majority of the grants would be in the next 2 financial years also. Which was the decision at PH&E Committee on a 3-year grant programme.
There's no other hands up. Councillor Smith, you still have the floor if you've got any further departments. Or okay, thank you. Councillor McClung.
Yeah, it's just in the same 400,000 and the concern that was expressed at the housing sub. Am I not right in thinking that that 400,000 was for small towns and villages?
That's what was agreed at committee, yes.
I think what was also agreed at the Housing Committee is that it was no longer only for that. If you look at the draft action plan for Queen Street, etc., that 400, unless we're double counting, but that facelift scheme was included in that draft action plan as well.
Okay, if there's any, we'll come back and get that clarified, absolute. Councillor McClung, you want back in?
Yeah, I've got to agree with Councillor Smith that yes, it was in there. However, there was concern expressed not only by myself as the chair, but also by another member regarding that money being included in the Priest one when it was set aside for the other towns.
Okay, thanks for that. We've no other hands up, so we'll note that there. We'll take on board the questions that have been asked, and we'll move on to item number 6. Excuse me, Carol.
Can I just confirm then that members are happy that we'll just take a note of the questions that have been asked and officers will respond as appropriate rather than appear in the minute? So the decision is just to note.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, I wonder about the route down which we're going here, because at the end of the day, I mean, I go back to the phrase that I used previously. I mean, I'm not coming here to participate in what I personally feel on occasions is verging towards a sort of cipher mentality. And I think that, you know, if we're serious about scrutiny in this authority and performance management, you know, we should be, you know, into these reports. We should, in fact, be minuting, as Ms Henshall in her capacity as governance officer has said, we should be minuting the questions, and we should, in fact, at the end of the day, be minuting the response to these questions. And in that way, it's out in the public domain as part of the archive. It's all very well saying that, you know, political groups and individual members will get responses to queries that are raised. That is not, you know, ensuring an information cascade. And the greatest of respect, Chairman, I'm not prepared to, you know, be part of that. And I would hope I'm not on my own in saying that in this chamber today.
Before I bring Councillor Nicholson, the point I'd probably pick up on that was announced at the beginning was we're on DVD now. We're out there, we're being streamed. This is all, again, every single word that's being said here today is being recorded. So we have a clear reference back to that, whether it's so, but I mean, if you still feel the issue, but I'll bring Councillor Nicholson in first, then you come back.
Actually, I think Councillor Geddes has got a good point there. The chairs, this was brought here by Labour's insistence in it being brought here as part of the budget development process. Part of the budget development process, and the reason it was brought here was so we could question and get answers from that. I think I noted there's been about 4 questions from members. The officers have came up and said, no, we'll need to get back to we haven't got that information on that. So, you know, as an information gathering for a budget setting process, it's not been very successful, and I think Councillor Geddes has got a point there.
I'll ask then, Carol, just to encapsulate the questions that have been asked and just be reassured from the members that have asked the questions. I'll do that first, and then I'll come back to you, Jim. Put your hand up first.
Thank you. So, in no particular order, there was a question raised in respect of the Moor Harbour and the assurances given in respect of the authorities in respect of the licensing for dredging. There was a query raised in respect of the trading standard costs, why they appear to be so much higher, and an assurance given that that information would be responded to. There was a query raised in respect of planning and building standards. The responses given in respect to this being based on SIPA figures, which were probably based on 210, there would be a service review, but I think from the challenge made, there will be some further information that will be worked through. There was issues raised on the 400,000 property investment, which was on page 60. It's facelift scheme, and this was linked then to the issues that were raised at Housing Sub. We then had issues raised in respect to Westrands, and that was looking at what the details of the grant covers, and also queries raised in respect of whether there were comparators in respect of other transport organisations and the funding that they receive from, or that recharges from local authorities. We then had a query raised in respect of queries raised on new starter businesses and the benchmarking, and also then the authority of the council in respect to the criteria. Members happy then if I captured that, and I will obviously be able to listen to the debate to confirm that we've captured all the questions and responses.
I'll bring Councillor Dempster in first.
Thanks, Chair. Just one that was mentioned and bypassed, and whilst that's fine, I think we should have a report brought at an early date to this committee on the derelict property policy, because it is something that Councillor Geddes and I have been challenged with in properties in our area for a long, long time. This was seen as an opportunity to address that, and the longer it remains in abeyance or incomplete, the longer we're left with what we would describe as blights in our communities that we can't tackle in the way we feel is appropriate. So I would like to see a report at an early date on the derelict buildings policy that we have asked to be brought to us.
Councillor Lever.
Just in terms of procedure, I mean, Carol's defined the questions, and obviously they can't be incorporated into the audio recording. So will the answers be specifically incorporated into the minutes of the meeting? Otherwise, the information's lost.
Where an answer has been provided in the meeting, yes, but obviously some of the items it was made, or some of the questions it's made clear that the information wasn't with officers, so we couldn't report anything in the minute that was not something that was considered here. But we will note that information will be provided and made available to all members, so it won't get lost.
But we've noted it was requested. We don't know. We haven't got any way of recording what the information was in the reply from the officers, which is in the public domain.
Thank you. Obviously, the question was asked from members. The responses will go back to members. That I think is the only audit trail that we can give at this stage.
As far as the request concerned from Councillor Dempster, do you have any? Do you know where that is at the moment? I think is it yourself that's looking after that derelict properties, or is that? Could you come up? Could you come up to the mic and just relay that, please? Councillor Dempster, you want to repeat? He's asking for the further report to come back. Do we know where? Do you want to just repeat what your question was, please?
I think the point I was making, Chair, was that we had an agreement in this committee that a derelict property policy would be developed by this council and brought to this meeting and then taken to full council for ratification. That has been a considerable time in the making, and I'm asking for a prompt response and an urgent update on where we are with the policy or the development of the policy, because the longer we leave it, the worse the situation gets for all communities that are challenged, for wanting a better word, with derelict properties and the issues surrounding them.
The body language of the whole committee is nodding, so it's obvious. I think everybody's in agreement with the statement that Councillor Dempster is saying, so do you have an idea when it will be coming back?
I can provide a briefing note very quickly after this meeting to say where we're at with this. We have, as I said before, we have a draft strategy and a draft grant scheme in place, and we'd be hoping I can bring a formal report back to committee, next committee of Planning, Housing and Environment Services to update on that fully, but I can provide a briefing note for members out with that process.
Okay, Councillor Dempster, then Geddes.
Thanks, Chair. Very briefly, I'm grateful to you and for that. I'd like that. And I'd like to see the policy in place so that we have an opportunity to implement measures that the policy provides for, but I'd like to see that an early date as well.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, it's on the back of that, and I agree entirely with Jim Dempster for the record, Chairman. But at the end of the day, how much money is in that fund? When was it allocated to the fund? How long has it been sitting in the fund? And why, if we're serious about performance and performance management in this authority, why has it not been addressed before now? I mean, and just while I have the mic, for want of a better term, I go back to the point, I think it might have been Councillor Smith that raised it about benchmarking in relation to performance of Swiss-Trans, funding, etc. I'm surprised, to put it mildly, and I've got to be careful here as a director. I'm not wearing a Swiss-Trans hat at this moment, but again, going back to the issue of performance and performance management, I'm surprised, quite frankly, that we don't have benchmarking arrangements put in place from this committee's side of the equation to look, in fact, at how effectively the money that we're allocating is being used by that particular organisation. Chairman, if we are serious about, scrutinising and management of performance, these are the issues we've really got to get, our jacket off and get into. And to me, that's part of the reason that this committee functions. I'm no convinced that we're doing it structurally in a correct fashion. I think, you've heard me before on this one, I think there are certain items on this agenda that should be dealt with on the basis of a different type of forensic questioning from other scrutiny type items. And we've never grasped that particular nettle either. So that's another issue, and you've heard me in the parameters of scrutiny committee making that very point. So there's a whole raft of issues, sir, which at the end of the day, in my view, if we are serious about scrutiny and performance management, need to be addressed. And we've got to go on and do it. Thank you.
Did you capture that, Ewan? I think some of the points that Councillor Gary was bringing up will be part of your briefing note that I think Councillor Dempster was nodding in appreciation that we'd receive that briefing note. Okay, thanks very much for that. Okay, item number 6, capital expenditure programme, capital investment strategy, bids for funding. Do we have anything to add to this report?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Thanks very much. It's open to the floor then for questions. Do we have any questions on this? Councillor Smith?
I'm just wondering how relevant the first recommendation actually is now, in the sense that clearly Policy and Resources Committee is now met to allocate funding, certainly on a provisional basis for the next few years, and a lot of these projects won't be included as bids, so to speak. They'll effectively have to be taken up almost, if you like, by the department. So we're approving bids, but what exactly then happens to those bids, given the decisions of Policy and Resources Committee? I'm also keen to know a wee bit more detail as to what the Crichton cycle route to Crichton Grounds actually covers. And I think, actually, Chair, and recommendation 2.5, we should have a discussion about that. Every single member of this committee was united in believing that more than £1 million should be allocated towards roads infrastructure for the current financial year. Members of the SNP and Conservative administration were very vocal in the media and at this meeting about the need to actually allocate sufficient funding. However, when it came to the Policy and Resources Committee on the 9th of October, those same groups voted against actually allocating any additional funding. The reality is the public see the SNP and Tory administration saying one thing when it comes to this committee meeting, and when it comes to actually voting to allocate funding, they actually do the opposite. It's all very well for members of this group, the groups in here, to complain about the lack of funding going towards roads infrastructure, but when it comes to actually doing something about it, those members are posted missing, and their groups in particular basically vote against that additional funding.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The process for the capital investment strategy, yes, I agree. I think this report's obviously coming a bit later in terms of the process, has moved on a bit. And certainly when I put the report together, effectively I was trying to work out just where we were going with the capital investment strategy and how we would manage that process through this committee, and to make sure that, looking at retrospectively, all of the kind of development type projects that this committee had given an undertaking to support or a mandate, I was just looking at in this report, particularly in the appendices, was picking up a number of those projects that, researching back, we didn't seem to have a mandate or an approval for this committee to take forward. And what I was trying to do primarily with this report was just capture those so that as we moved into the capital investment strategy, and I provided details for the, as it turned out, in terms of all these projects sitting in with the infrastructure asset class for Policy and Resources Committee, that I could make sure that I was allowing an allocation within the kind of outline bid that was submitted to Policy and Resources Committee. In terms of moving forward, I would anticipate coming back either in November or January with a further report on where we're going with the 3-year capital investment strategy for this committee. We've been allocated in the next financial year £9 million for the infrastructure asset class, £9 million in the year after, and £8 million in year 3. And that reflects the Policy and Resources Committee of an additional, effectively having the baseline allocation for the infrastructure asset class, plus the extra £1 million in the next 2 financial years, as well as the £1 million that's been allocated additionally this year. So in terms of a report to November, how I would anticipate doing it would be to look in at a high level on how we're going to spend that £9 million between the programmes, the maintenance programmes, and some of these development type projects which we have mandates for and which this report seeks to just pick up some of the outstanding mandates and then possibly come back in January with the detail of the schemes within each of these programmes. Having had the allocations against the programmes agreed by the committee, we can then work on the detail and then have a bit of time in terms of planning preparation prior to the new financial year. On the Crichton cycle route, I don't have details in front of me at the present time. I'm quite happy I can arrange for a plan to be emailed out to the ward members, but it's very much an area where we see there's certainly came out in the White Sands Master Plan charrette process, the whole kind of interconnectivity for sustainable transport routes and making sure that the cycle routes, if you look at a map of all the kind of cycle routes we have around Dumfries, there is a bit of a gap in that area as there is in Georgetown, and we'll deal with that in a later report in this committee. But I'm quite happy to send out details of what we're looking at on the ground in terms of that particular project to the ward members. The discussion on the additional roads funding, I would just say that obviously we're moving forward. August Policy and Resources Committee gave an additional £1 million funding to road structural maintenance for this financial year, and those schemes are being developed and have been identified in conjunction with DG First, and we're moving forward to make sure that that expenditure is carried out based on the direction that was given in the previous, in July, at Planning House and Environment Services Committee, to target the residential roads and the urban, the rural lifeline links. That's all.
Okay, just before you come back in, Colin, we'll bring Carol's wanting to say something.
Thank you. I just want to advise something's been introduced into the debate on which I'm not cited, and it may be a number of other members who are not a member of Policy and Resources are not cited, which is what the decision was at the committee on the capital programme. So can I just be clear? Is there anything material in the decision that's made that changes these recommendations from officers?
I think first thing to pick up on, 2.5 is referring to the 14th of August. Councillor Smith referred to October, two completely different dates. But I understand where he's coming from. I think is that the point you're picking up on? Or?
I think it was more material in respect of what was the decision at Policy and Resources, and has that in any way then tracking through, does that require any change in the recommendations that officers are making to this committee?
Just having a quick look at the recommendations, I would think that's not the case. These recommendations are primarily concerned with capital spend in the current financial year, whereas the Policy and Resources report was obviously dealing with the next 3 financial years. The only kind of overlap and impact would be the mandates that we're looking for. But effectively, I've worked on the basis that funding for those projects, if they're mandated by this committee, should be available within our baseline budget that I would hope to bring to the next meeting of this committee. But I don't think it affects the recommendations.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Smith, you can come back for...
Yeah, I mean, I'll certainly be moving an amendment to that recommendation because a decision was obviously taken at October, and it's not an amendment to officer's recommendation clearly, but the decision was certainly made in October meeting not to allocate anything over and above the £1 million, despite the fact that members of this committee are quoted in the media saying that the issue will be looked again at when it came to the October Policy Committee. The Policy Committee had the authority to put additional funding in for this financial year, given the fact that there's underspend in the region of £3 million, but chose not to do so. And I think I'll certainly be moving an amendment to that when it comes to the recommendations. But can I just come back on the issue of bids for capital funding? What I'm not clear on is exactly how we'll progress some of these particular bids. Now, there is the £9 million within infrastructure, and that will cover, by and large, the sort of routine and sort of smaller projects for the department. But when it comes to the larger projects, and there's one contained in here, which is the £1.6 million for English Street, I'm not envisaging that being dealt with within the £9 million that's allocated for infrastructure. Now, at the October Policy and Resources Committee, the pretty paltry sum of £1 million a year was allocated to economic regeneration over the next 3 years by the administration. Now, the reality is it's going to cost £1 million alone just for Burn Statue, and I appreciate that's in this year's budget, but that just shows you the scale of it, that if one project, which basically involves paving and putting in new bus stops at Burn Statue, costs £1 million, we have an administration that's allocated the grand sum of £1 million, frankly, for the entire region when it comes to economic development each year for the next 3 years. So I'm concerned that a lot of the major economic development projects that are being discussed by this department simply won't have funding allocated towards them. And the reality is this committee, this department is actually going to miss out when it comes to funding these projects. How exactly are we going to fund English Street? How exactly are we going to fund White Sands regeneration and the flood prevention scheme? How exactly are we going to fund the car parking strategy within Dumfries? And I'm sure other members will have projects within their area that they want to highlight as well, although I do note that we're going to spend £2.4 million probably in Stranraer next November. But how are we actually going to fund all these particular projects when the reality is the amount of money allocated to economic development in the capital investment strategy is so low?
I'd maybe just start briefly and say that, yes, the infrastructure asset class, the £9 million we're looking at doesn't include these economic development projects, and that though they would have to be separately funded. There's a piece of work that myself and Ewan have to do in terms of looking at the allocations that have been made and the potential spend and bids that are kind of bid that we'd be making to draw down against the priority projects under economic development. And so it is separate from the infrastructure class.
Follow-up question, when will we see this? Obviously, the one thing that the administration did accept from the Labour Group's proposals was to allocate an extra £150,000 to the department to actually work up some of these particular projects. When will we actually see costings and timelines for these particular projects? Because the reality is, my fear is that a lot of these projects will simply fall by the wayside because we'll miss out when other projects come forward. The Dumfries Learning Town one, for example, is obviously on the radar. And a number of other projects are going to come forward, and these ones are simply going to slip by. So when will we actually see costings and proposals for these particular projects coming forward?
I think particularly the funding to support the White Sands regeneration was very welcome, and what we've continued to work on that at the moment, and we're targeting coming back to an early committee in the new year, an early meeting of this committee in the new year with a more detailed proposal for White Sands, a delivery plan, and some more detail on the costings of the whole scheme.
Councillor Geddes, then McConnell and Peacock.
Yes, Chairman, going back to the issue of funding, let me make it clear that I was one of those at the PHES committee meeting in April of this year who asked, in fact, that as much of that £3.5 million as possible be taken and be allocated, as it were, for roads, improving roads infrastructure. And at the end of the day, it seems to me that, what we finished up doing, certainly on 13th of August, was a pale imitation of what some of us had hoped for. All the more ironic, let me say, in my view, but the fact that we allocated, I think it's nearly £700,000, as it were, to DG First to tool up, for want of a better term, to allow them, in fact, to carry out, the works in question. Now, the thrust of my question now, sir, is that my understanding was that part of the justification that was put to me anyway, in relation to what I have already said was a pretty small beer, was in fact that there was no way of spending additional monies which might be allocated this year. I would like, in fact, clarification of that, because my response at the time was, well, if we can't do it, we're an in-house contractor, we should be looking, in fact, at the end of the day, of employing other people, given the parlous state of our roads infrastructure in Dumfries and Galloway, particularly, but not exclusively, in relation to such as rural lifeline links and housing scheme roads, etc. So I'd like some clarification on that, if I may, Chairman.
Danger of speaking on behalf of DG First, but I would understand that additional resources put for road structural maintenance could be accommodated within DG First in the current financial year. Beyond that, I think the kind of feedback from both officers in DG First and Planning and Environment was that we would, the more time that we have to plan further improvement works, the more convinced that we are that we're actually targeting the improvements in the right place. DG First currently do use external contractors for a significant part of the road structural maintenance programme already, as well as using in-house resources. So there is already that bit of a balance of resources, both within the council and private contractors.
So for somebody, suffering my degree of intellectual challenge, what are you saying then, Mr. Herriot, that we could in fact have spent that money? Additional allocation?
What I'm saying is that there wasn't, I mean, there was capacity, there was some capacity within DG First to take on some more work this year. There wasn't, we didn't put a value or a figure on that, but I think there was a view that they'd already been just given in August an extra £1 million for targeting road structural maintenance, and that we wanted to give them, certainly, the more time we have to plan and prepare for these schemes, the more convinced we are that we would be surfacing most effectively.
Councillor McClung.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just some clarification for me. Councillor Smith mentioned 2.4 million being spent in Stranraer, apparently being brought to the committee in November. That 2.4 million is the transport interchange money that came for the Scottish Government, no council money, is that right?
Yes.
Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Chair. Just again, some points of information and clarification for my own benefit on the capital bids that we're asked to approve for moving forward. On Appendix 3 there, the proposed cycling and walking infrastructure, and point 5, the bid is for 50,000 per annum. Could I have some clarifications as to whether that is a single annual bid or whether it's progressed, whether it's a 2 or a 3 year bid proposed? Also on Appendix 4, the Annan Bridge Gateway, excuse me, on point 5 again, where it states that funding is already secured for the preliminary works. Am I to presume that that money is the money that's already been allocated in preliminary works comes from the PH&E grant, which is on page 60, and it is detailed in there? It's just for clarification, so I know that where that money has come from. And finally, on the English Street project, I'm just wondering why on point 6 there, external funding has been refused from the Heritage Lottery. I mean, there must be a reason why this project is seen not fit to the criteria of the Heritage Lottery. So if they're not prepared to put extra funding into this, I'd just like some clarification as to why.
If I could just come back on the first point. The proposed cycling and walking infrastructure programme, in terms of the suggested capital profile, 50,000 per annum, my view was that we would, when I present the detail on the expenditure against the proposed expenditure against the infrastructure asset class, that I would show that on a recurring basis. That would be each year on a per annum basis. And effectively, I think what we're trying to do is give recognition to some of the targets that we've set within the local transport strategy, and also give ourselves some scope in terms of drawing down external funding, whether that's from Sustrans, just to support some of these initiatives. So I would see it as a recurring funding stream.
On Annan Bridge, yes, the money is the money in the revenue budget and the existing money we have. It's not for preliminary works, it's for design to in effect get this scheme ready to go. And in terms of the English Street THI bid, the application we submitted to Heritage Lottery in the Scotland office was accepted as being a very strong bid and was put forward as one of only 3 from Scotland into the UK pot. The scale of that project meant it had to be a UK Heritage Lottery decision, and at that point it purely became an issue of I think the amount of funding available against a number of projects, and as much as that it was very well oversubscribed and just didn't have enough merit to get through on that level. It wasn't a reflection on the quality of the project at all, and that was the feedback we received from HLF.
Okay, thanks for that. Thank you. We have Councillor Dempster, then Lever.
Thanks, Chair. It's on the Appendix, the proposed cycling and walking infrastructure programme, and just as a thought, an afterthought, if you like, I don't know when we're going to have to maybe review the programme of cycling infrastructure investment, because clearly it's no it doesn't appear to be a a successful venture, especially the hire bicycle thing that we're running, that there's not a huge take-up as far as I understand. So I think sometime we're going to have a look at that again. But to my point, point 6 on page 77, there's a subtlety in there in the bottom paragraph where it says bids to Sustrans for 4 projects have been successful, although match funding requires to be found in some instances in future years. I don't want to see us being tied into a situation where we start a programme of work and then we have a further bid to the capital investment programme and we're told that we knew about it when we agreed this earlier in the date, if you understand what I'm trying to say. We should have an indication if there are projects ongoing or proposed, how much the total cost will be, and it should be itemised in each of these, so that if we commence a project and have to find additional money or match funding, we should know how much that is. Because in the event of failing to find match funding, you can't leave a half-finished project. The council will probably have to pick up the bill and complete the job. And I think that's nonsense.
I think my understanding of what you're asking there, Jim, is, Councillor Dempsey, sorry, and I think we've done it many times in the past, is a project won't start until such time as all the funding's there. So I suppose it's for you to pick up, if you can, Stephen, regards how that would normally work.
I think in terms of the Sustrans funding, the actual allocations that are made, and some of them are in this report for some of the projects, we don't actually draw down the funding until we've incurred the costs. So that it's not as if we take the funding in advance and there's a risk that we have to pay back if we don't deliver the projects. I think what you're probably asking for, and it is maybe quite a good thing, is maybe more clarity in terms of if we're entering into a project at the feasibility stage and we take some funding for that, that we try and identify the kind of forward potential commitments that may come up upon the council. If we've got funding just to develop some of the cycling and the walking way, and it meets the kind of aspirations of the local transport strategy and some of the council priorities in terms of the single outcome agreement, then we're obviously quite keen just to take that external funding. But I think we could maybe be clearer in the report if what the kind of longer term within the project to see it through to fruition, what the kind of cost impacts might be.
Councillor Dempsey?
Thanks, Stephen. Happy with that, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lever?
Thanks, Chair. Appendix 1 on page 73, 20 mile an hour speed limit and traffic calming programme. I just hope, given the trend nationally and across Europe, that there is a move towards 20 mile an hour speed limits, given the current financial situation, the projected financial situation. We're going to move away from hard engineering works and look more at signage, because the difference in the cost, I think, is about tenfold. So if we are going to develop this programme at all, we do need to move more towards signage. I remain unconvinced that hard engineering is the way to go forward. We get numerous complaints about the state of speed bumps and the fact that they are wrecking the roads, etc. So we do need to have a mind shift effectively in terms of signage, in terms of 20 mile an hour zones. And can I raise 3.2, the Sustrans grant funding, the process? I assume that the council identifies areas where we would prefer cycleways, puts a bid into Sustrans, and they then say yay or nay. So presumably there must be a list of projects within the council somewhere of areas which are being considered for submission to Sustrans funding. I'm thinking specifically of the A75 between Culin and the town centre. That is a very major gap in our systems, and at the moment I would quite like to know where that is within the process. That's a very, very dangerous stretch of road, as anybody knows who drives down, let alone cycles down it, in order to link effectively the east part of the cycleways with the town centre and through to the west.
Just on, before you come in, Stephen, in the back of what Councillor Lever was saying, it's been brought up 2 or 3 times in the past. I wonder what designing streets came in, and I know that's for new sites, came in 2010. Well, when will we officially incorporate that as a policy, I think, maybe as a council?
Okay. In terms of the 20 mile an hour programme, I mean, we'd have quite a lot of feedback from members through the Member Officer Working Group and just how we've agreed to take that forward, and we did have a report to this committee on that. In terms of the detailed schemes, when we're working up the programme, we'll come to this committee for approval of funding, and there would be an opportunity then to consider the schemes. Cycleway projects, I would need to come back to you on A75 Pillin to Town Centre and just get some feedback to members on the priority on that. Designing streets is it's effectively being used in discussions with developers. It is planning policy, as I understand it, in terms of it's a Scottish Government document. It hasn't come before this committee specifically, and it might be something that I can certainly discuss with Steve Rogers and just where that sits in terms of it being referenced within the local development plan. But I would need to get clarity on that for the document itself, although it is being used as Scottish Government guidance and policy.
Okay, thanks for that. That's it. That's all speakers that are there. Recommendation 2.1, approve the submission of the bids as identified in appendices 1 to 6. Can we approve that? Thank you. 2.2, accept the offer of grant from Sederunt and the 5 subsequent bullet points thereafter. Thank you. 2.3, agree that the C28W culvert be added to the bridge structural maintenance programme due to the urgent need for the repair. Thank you. Agreed. 2.4, agree that works to extend St Michael's Cemetery to be added to the burial grounds programme. Agreed. Thank you. And I'll come back to you, Councillor Smith. You referred earlier to the recommendation 2.5. Are you still of the same mind?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to add. I'm quite happy with the first part of the recommendation, but I'd add on a second sentence that says, and expresses disappointment at the decision of the Policy and Resources Committee on the 9th of October not to increase this allocation for the current financial year.
Is anybody otherwise minded? Could you just reread that out again, please, so we're absolutely clear, Councillor Smith?
Okay, it's obviously as worded in this document, 2.5, with the addition, and expresses disappointment at the decision of the Policy and Resources Committee on the 9th of October not to increase this allocation for the current financial year.
There's nobody otherwise minded. We don't have an amendment to that. You got encapsulated that, Carol? Okay, thank you.
If I can then just confirm the decision of members in respect of item 6 is as per the recommendation with an addition at 2.5 where this committee is then, in addition to the wording of noting the decision of Policy and Resources, is expressing its disappointment at the decision of Policy and Resources on the 9th of October not to increase this allocation. Members happy?
For the current financial year, because that was the decision. Yeah.
Oh, it's allocation for this financial year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Item number 7, business plan for 2012-15 Planning and Environment Services. Again, do you have anything to add to this report?
Nothing to add, Chair.
So open to the floor. Do any members have any questions? Was that your hand, Councillor Foster?
It was, Chair. I'll hold it higher the next time. Page 110, it's indicators, etc. My question, I'll ask 2 simple questions, and depending on the answer you might allow me back. But simply, has there been any call for noise monitoring? And if so, have we people trained to carry it out?
That question's for you, Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Could I ask the member noise monitoring in regards to...
Neighbours, Arsville.
With regards to the Environmental Health Service, we no longer have an out-of-hours noise enforcement team. This was stopped some years ago. A lot of this domestic-type noise complaint is now dealt with by the antisocial behaviour team. The antisocial behaviour team and the police actually provide the response now for domestic noise. Because of that, you'll see it's reflected in the 0 returns for these particular indicators.
Yeah, I've great concern about that, and I've great concern about the way the report's worded. Improvement action, not applicable. Resource implications, not applicable. In other words, a simple answer to my question, we haven't people carried out to monitor noise. We don't do it. We leave it to landlords and such like as DGHP. I believe the protocol between DGHP and the antisocial behaviour team is being reviewed as we speak. But to say that improvement action is not applicable or resource implications are not applicable is clearly wrong. Are we meeting our legal requirements at present?
Yes, we are. The Environmental Health Service no longer deals with antisocial behaviour type noise.
And yet we don't have the equipment to monitor it. The antisocial behaviour team is part of this council. We're meant to be an holistic council.
The antisocial behaviour team does have the facility now to monitor noise.
I can quote you as saying that we have the facility, people are trained to do it, and we have the equipment to do so. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. That's not what I'm hearing or being fed back, but that's for an arena outside here.
That's what you're saying, Martin, I think, is that that's not the responsibility of your service. Is that
Correct.
what you're saying?
Correct.
It's not the responsibility of your service.
Correct.
And do you want to identify exactly what service it is for the sake of Councillor Foster?
It's the antisocial behaviour team.
Absolutely. Yeah, I quite understand that. And they have the equipment and they have the people trained to do so.
I handed over the equipment a matter of weeks ago, and I believe 6 of their staff have now been trained.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Tuckfield, then Geddes.
Thank you, Chair. Page 145, the third bullet point under projects, employability and skills. How is this going to be rolled out, and how soon is it going to be rolled out, and will we have a similar service to what we have enjoyed in the past?
Sorry, could you possibly just repeat that, Councillor Tuckfield? Sorry, I missed that.
How is it going to be rolled out? How soon is it going to be rolled out? And will we have a similar service to what we've enjoyed in the past?
Did you pick up on the page numbers and such like at the beginning?
Sorry, just in relation to the bullet point under Employability Partnership Action Plan.
Yes.
That continues to be rolled out and is predominantly reported to Strategic Partnership, but this captures all the work that's been done around more choices, more chances for vulnerable young people, and the support service that we put in place for adults also. Reflects the ongoing work and the progress we've made year on year, so there'll be no reduction in any of the services that we provide.
If you would just allow me back in again. For 5 years, we had a particularly good project, the land and street scenes training delivered by a local provider, which had almost 100% success in gaining employment for people with possibly who would experience great difficulty in the open employment market. Is that going to continue?
That's a project that wouldn't form part of that action plan in particular. The action plan is about the public sector services coming together to deliver services. The project you're talking about was run this year for the last year of a 3-year contract, and it's currently under review, as all our programmes are, to look at how effective it was and what the potential for rolling out that kind of programme is in the future. So certainly under review, and certainly forms part of our thinking, but at this point in time I can't give a guarantee that will continue, but certainly we're reviewing it based on this year's programme performance.
If you allow me very quickly. Then I'm sort of assured if as part of your thinking it may be considered, because it did have 100% success.
Councillor Geddes.
Yes, Chair. Page 102 and subsequent pages were on the issue of exception reporting for planning and building standards. Does not make good reading, Chairman. I think that's something of an understatement. What I find even more unpalatable, not to say difficult to swallow, are some of the reasons that are adduced for the drop-off in performance. In particular, quarter four performance last year was poor as a result of temporary disruption caused by the physical moves and implementation of new single processes, and this has dragged down the annual figures. Well, I'd have to say, Chairman, that some of us, myself included, but I was by no means alone, made it clear, in fact, when we were talking about the brave new world, for want of a better term, into which we were going as a planning authority, that we did not, in fact, expect to see and would not accept as reasons, any diminution or falling off in performance, as it were, in relation to restructuring and reorganisation. Some of us, Chairman, swallowed hard at giving up the old area regulatory committees. Some of us valued them. They performed a good function, etc. And perhaps, in my case, I'll speak for myself and no one else, it was somewhat against my better judgment that I did sign up to the brave new world. And what I would have to say is that I am singularly disappointed as a consequence at what I see as really the unacceptable falling off in standards of performance. Now, I did mention, I think at the last meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee, and I did indicate that I would raise the issue here today, because I'd like to know just exactly where we are at this moment in time, and whether or not we are turning around the service, because I think it's absolutely essential that we do, particularly when we have the Scottish Government saying at the end of the day that they will only sanction increases in fees, etc., to authorities, in fact, who can show and can demonstrate that they are effective and efficient authorities. So I'd be grateful for responses to these, sir. Thank you.
Just before you come in, Steve, I just see there's a report further on the agenda. I attended the Planning Conveners of Scotland meeting a couple of weeks ago, and the Minister for Local Government and Planning said implicitly that the fact that they've been able to, for each local authority, being able to increase its planning fees isn't by any means definitive. It's subject to the whole of Scotland showing an improvement in the first place, then thereafter. So I suppose it would only be the whole of Scotland has to, he was absolutely clear about that, the whole of Scotland has to show that improvement first. Then he would at that point put forward for legislation. If the Scotland in general wasn't showing that improvement, then it wouldn't even come forward, it wouldn't head towards legislation whatsoever. So when I heard that, it gave me some concerns, and I raised, like yourself, at Policy and Resources, planning and the performance of planning being one of them, as well as many other parts of planning, is fundamental to especially under the financial crisis that Dumfries and Galloway, as well as the rest of the UK, is in at the moment. Planning is fundamental foundstone of getting the economic climate back up on its feet, getting the economy back up there. So if that, and I think the Planning House Environment has to consider this very strongly, if we're not able to increase fees later on in the year because it doesn't come forward as legislation, if that isn't an option to us, we need to be thinking strong and hard what we actually do in regards to the plan department. And that doesn't mean I'm insinuating in any way that we downsize or anything like that, because it is so important. But we have to make a very strong case as it comes forward in the new budget process. So I wonder if you could maybe take that into consideration as well, Steve, when you're answering the question.
Thank you, Chair. In response to the queries that have been raised, if we can kind of work from really where we are just now back the way, I can certainly assure members of this committee that performance is improving, and that what we had last year, as set out in the exception report, was a series of fundamental operational changes to the way in which the service is delivered, which did unfortunately impact on our performance last year, and that's set out in the exception report. However, the information that we have reported for quarter one shows an improvement over the performance for the previous year, and I've also got access to the albeit unaudited figures for quarter two, which show continuing improvements in performance as we bed in our new processes within the office. The other thing that I wanted to say really is in relation to the way in which our performance is going to be measured going forward, in that there is a very dramatic change to the way in which planning performance in particular is to be measured, in that these performance indicators that we've been used to reporting on in terms of percentages of applications dealt with within a particular target time is being scrapped, and it's being replaced with a new measure of average time taken for different categories of application. And we're now working with the Scottish Government to produce those new figures. And certainly in the performance reports that you receive in future, you will see reference to the new average time taken to determine planning applications, which is probably a much more meaningful way of actually measuring this. The other change that's happening in the way that planning performance is measured is that there is a move away from this very one-dimensional approach of just focusing purely on the speed of planning applications to a much more rounded approach, which looks at issues to do with service quality, as well as all the other aspects of the planning service, including how we're performing in terms of our development plan, how we're performing in terms of enforcement activity. A much broader range of measures has been developed in consultation with the Scottish Government, and these are now all incorporated into what's called our new planning performance framework. Now, from starting with this current financial year, we will have a requirement to formally submit to Scottish Government an annual planning performance framework which captures all of these wider measures. And it's my intention, as I explained to the Scrutiny and Performance Committee, to bring that performance report for approval to the appropriate meeting of this committee. So you will be getting a much more rounded picture of where our planning service currently sits, rather than having to rely on a single focused indicator which purely looks at planning applications. In terms of how that all links in with planning fees, Scottish Government, as members of this committee are aware, recently consulted on proposals to increase planning fees in order to address the chronic underfunding that's recognised across Scotland of the planning service. Ministers are very keen to demonstrate a linkage between improving performance within planning services and the introduction of a new fee regime. So it is important that we do continue to evidence continuous improvement, and that's why within the business plan, and this is where the linkage between the performance report, if you like, and the outturn for our performance in 2011-12 and how that's fed into our new business plan is absolutely critical, because there are a number of references in the new business plan to the steps that we are taking during the current financial year to address this issue and to create and to develop a continuous improvement approach, particularly within development management, that allows us to deliver those performance improvements. You'll also see reference in the business plan to the desire to get a much sharper focus on customer service improvements, which is the other aspect of the service that we would like to see improved, by rolling out the customer service excellence program, which has been developed for a number of years within building standards, cross into development management. And we've now just started that process by creating a joint project team to implement that. So that's to give you an idea of the steps that are being taken and that are reflected in the new business plan.
Thanks so much for that, Steve. Alistair, you want back in?
Very briefly, with your leave, sir, I'm grateful to Mr. Rogers. It is a helpful reply, a helpful response. I think, I would look forward to getting the report that he's referred to as soon as possible. One comment I would make, sir, on the back of your statements, the meeting you attended, I think it's bizarre, to say the least, for any government of whatever political persuasion, in fact, to take the attitude that all local authorities in Scotland were penalised because of failing authorities. That's not the way that you address the issue, in my view. And I would like to see this authority, Chairman, recognised as an exemplar of good practice in everything that it does. And I would hope that we can, in fact, up our game and we do become, in fact, recognised as a good, effective planning authority. But you know, for us to suffer a hit of not being able to increase fees on the basis of unsatisfactory performance by planning authorities elsewhere in Scotland, as far as I'm concerned, is simply not acceptable. And I think we've got to make the representations to that effect in the strongest possible terms. And I think we should be seeking support of other like-minded authorities to do that. That, to me, is not the way. By all means, if there are failing authorities, Chairman, address it with them. And if there are authorities who are already exemplars of good practice and heading that way, encourage them and allow the issue of an increase in a grossly underfunded service, you know, to take place by an increase in the fees. Grateful for your indulgence.
Okay, thanks. I think just picking up on your last point, I think we should wait and see what happens first, because if obviously if there was an improvement demonstrated across the whole of Scotland, then we'd move towards that phasing process. But I'm happy to be quoted in this. I am confident that there will be an improvement in the planning. In particular, we're actually looking at the development management side over the next year, and there's enough within the business plan to make them improvements. Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Chair. I just really concur with a lot of Councillor Geddes' comments here, but I would also like to add a few of my own. It's to do with planning and building standards, and the KPIs that are produced there on page 96. And I hear what Mr. Rogers has just been saying there, and I understand a lot of that, but I still feel that it needs to be mentioned. And in a way, this particular indicators need to be split, because the problem is obviously on the actual planning side of this department and not necessarily the building standards. Because the only progress and the only ticks that we have on these indicators is on the building standard side. So I don't have any concerns with them. I know they're working hard and they've improved dramatically. But the planning side of that department obviously hasn't. It hasn't been able to keep up with the movement of the building standards. And I think it's very worrying, because it is a large concern within this committee and within this particular department. And it has a very definite impact on the future and the regeneration of Dumfries and Galloway as a whole. I have gone through the exception report as well, and there's part of the excuses that are in there that I don't agree with. I don't wholly agree with the fact that the movement into a single office is really the main source behind some of these indicators being so low. I accept partly, but not wholly on that. And the other point really, because, well, going back to that, there's the whole of the PES, as it states earlier on, has had a 15% downturn in staff and commissioning, etc. like that. But the rest of the departments within this report, all the KPIs are looking positive and encouraging, apart from the planning side of it. So that really needs to be noted. It needs to be seriously taken on board, and it needs to be looked into to seeing ways of improving that. Again, I understand what Mr. Rogers has just said there. But just one other part there on the interpretation there, where it in the exception report, it states that greater delegated powers would help increase these KPIs. Well, I don't agree with that at all, Chair. I certainly don't agree with giving more powers to the planning officers and taking it away from members, because I think members' input into the planning system is needed to be there. It needs to be there for all sorts of reasons which we don't need to go into. But I certainly don't agree with that. More delegated powers to officers on the planning side is a way forward.
I mean, it's 93% delegated authority. I think 93% of decisions are made. But there's a couple of comments I want to make at the end. But do you want to come back on that, Stephen? And obviously, if the next speaker after that comes to leave, if it's not in planning, Mr. Speedy wants to say a couple of words as well.
It's just really a clarification, first of all, on that last point that Councillor Peacock raised. That wording is a standard form of wording because this is a statutory performance indicator. It's the Audit Scotland that provide that wording. That's not my wording, and in fact, we've already addressed that issue through the reforms and so on, and the modernisation that we put in place 18 months ago. So that's not a factor in terms of explaining our own performance. That's for sure. The other issue that you raised in terms of the fact that about the changes and the office moves. I think the fact that our worst quarter's performance within development management coincided exactly with the physical moves and the disruption to the systems is not a coincidence. What happened was that we had to put the processes of 3 offices into one, and when we started to implement that, we very quickly realized that the way in which things were being done in each of those 3 offices was very different. So we had a much bigger job on our hands than we had previously anticipated, and I explained this in some detail to the Scrutiny and Performance Committee. And actually, I think we underestimated the amount of effort that would be required to integrate those 3 systems. The reason that it affects planning applications much more than building warrants is that planning applications has now moved over to an entirely electronic-based system, which is dependent upon office processes around the receipt, checking, validation, scanning, indexing, redacting of documents. And it was those processes that we found were being done differently in each of the 3 offices, and we had to put in place a completely new structure in order to do those much more efficiently within the new structure. That's why it's had a much more significant impact on development management compared to building standards. The other thing that I would say, just for clarification, is that when you refer to planning, we need to be careful here that we're actually talking about development management, which is only one aspect of planning. We do have other facets to the planning service, including development planning and the environment team, and their work was unaffected by this.
Okay, thanks for that, Steve. Councillor Lever, your question wasn't regards to plan, I don't think, was it? Mr. Speedy, you want to say a couple of words?
Thank you, Chair. If I can just assure members that we acknowledge the concern regarding performance and development management. This is a key area of focus for improvement within the department. It has the fullest support of the management team because it's wider in its consultation aspect with applications, and we are looking at all these consultation aspects to improving the flow of information to ensure that the planners have all the tools and all the information to hand to improve their performance. So it's a wider project that we're looking at. We are also dealing with our colleagues in DG First, who are critical to local information coming into that system. So please be assured, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, that we are looking at this very seriously. We have made good progress, and let's hope that continues. And as Steve has indicated, we will be reporting that regularly to members.
Councillor Ogilvie, on the same point. Yep.
What's missing, I hear the argument, and that's what's reflected, but from experience, you know that delegated decisions then come to committee or they go to appeal, so things go round twice. That can put an awful burden on the throughput of a planning, because the same planning people have to do that work and get distracted from new applications, if you like. So we needed a fuller picture of what's not in here, I don't think, is the number of applications per year, and the number that come back again through appeals, if you like, when there's clearly a decision made by this committee to support the officer's rejection of it, it still comes back in. And if it goes to the Scottish Government for an appeal, then there's all that background information that some officer would have to sit down and do anyway to support the decision that we've made here. So there's a lot of unhidden or unspecified work. I'm trying to support you a wee bit, saying that it's not as clear as folk would like to make it out. It's the throughput and the duplication and then going back over it again. How do we get to see that sort of information?
And just on the same point, we went from 7 to 3, I think it is. Now we've got the full council of LRB and the Planning Application Committee. Is the workload reduced as far as committees concerned? Because I think Ronnie's picking up on that point, Councillor Ogilvie. I think that's the point you're picking up on as well, is that there's as much being referred through committee. Is that workload? And I think Councillor Peacock picked up on the same point. Or have we actually reduced that by reorganising the committee system?
There's a slight reduction in the number of applications going to committee. I think one of the changes that the Scottish Government are proposing to make in the coming year that will make a big impact there is to remove this requirement for all council interest applications to have to be reported to committee, which results in committee time being taken up by a considerable number of uncontroversial and straightforward applications just simply because they happen to be extensions to schools or community centres or sports facilities. So that's one change that will reduce the amount of applications that are going to committee. But I don't think that's necessarily going to have a fundamental impact on these performance figures. I think the wider point that Councillor Ogilvie was making there will be addressed more fully through these new planning performance reports that I was just talking about, because there is a section within the new performance framework that specifically has information on the number of appeals in any one year, the number of appeals that were successful or rejected, and the number of LRB cases that were considered during the year, and again, the number of LRB cases where the original decision was upheld and the number where the original decision was overturned. So you will be getting a much fuller picture, and I think that just emphasises the point I was making previously in response to Councillor Geddes, that what you're getting is a very narrow and one-dimensional information at the moment through the SPI, but this new planning performance framework provides a much wider and broader basis for assessing performance. I mentioned that we would be submitting that planning performance framework for this year to the Scottish Government following the end of the financial year, but what we've actually had to do is, in the current year, we've been participating in a pilot exercise where we've done a draft planning performance framework, which we've actually put together and completed, applying it retrospectively to 2011-12, and I'm quite happy, Chair, to circulate that to all members of this committee, because it is now completed and has been submitted for consideration as part of this pilot year. So I'm more than happy to circulate that, because that probably gives a much better picture to members of where the planning service currently is.
Okay, thanks for that. So if we're happy, members happy to have that circulated, is that a piece of information that we'd like to see? Thanks so much for that. And I think, just to, unless somebody else is coming back in, made a statement earlier, I know where we've been with development management in particular, as you referred to, but I think I'm quite clear that I know where we're going as well, and I've made that statement earlier. I'm happy to be quoted. I'm confident in seeing improvements across Dumfries and Galloway. But Councillor Ogilvie, do you want the last word there?
It's a totally different question. It's on page 91, or the first part of the coloured thing, and it's the percentage of staff who have completed an annual performance development review. 0. Quite worrying if you want to try and encourage the staff through their personal development plans or PPI accreditation. I'm sure somebody's going to say that's a mistake.
I think this has been brought up in many other committees as well. I don't think it's a mistake actually, but I think it's because of when it was initially implemented. So it's Councillor Ogilvie, yourself, and then it's Councillor Lever after that.
In the past, we have reported on our staff development reviews, SDRs, and we've always reported a very good take-up on that. In fact, performance has been 100% throughout the department. That whole process has now changed to PDRs, and there has been training of staff, and the target to get everything completed is by December of this year. And it's just the way that the information has been compiled and put into Covalent. It looks very poor, but indications from my business team are that we're well on progress to meeting the target by the 31st of December this year, which falls out this reporting period of 11-12.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Lever?
Yeah, in part that's answered my question, because I think at a time when we are facing huge cuts in staffing and reorganisation, to just assume that the remaining staff can take on the responsibility without any additional training is very, very risky in terms of the council's credibility and for the staff themselves. So I hope that will be addressed and ensure that staff who are adopting new roles do have the appropriate assessment and training before they actually go into these new roles. Can I ask some questions about the household waste, composted and recycling on page 94? The target was 5%, which is incredibly low as a target. It's not really over-ambitious, but fortunately we exceeded it about fourfold. But that still places us as the lowest recycling local authority on mainland Scotland, and only just behind Shetland, which may have more justification in terms of being an island. But I note on page 166, 342, the percentage of householders recycling at curbside is currently 0. Next year it will be 0, but it will rise to 50% by 2015/16. And I assume there's going to be further reports coming to this committee about how achievable that is, because that's a huge increase in terms of the rural nature of Dumfries and Galloway, let alone the urban areas. So can I have some more information on that one?
Yeah, before I let Stephen answer the detailed question about the recycling figures, there will be reports coming to Planning, Housing, Environment Services about the Scottish Government's zero waste regulations and how, as officers, we would recommend that the Council deals with these. And we'll be advising members of that meeting, which will receive that information hopefully very soon.
Yep, if I could just provide some clarity on this. The figure with a target of 5% was the percentage of household waste composted recycling. This was a new or a redefined SPI, and it was a move. It was a change in terms of what was considered within the recycling figure. So before it was municipal solid waste was very much the recycling figure that was considered, whereas this is just focusing on the household waste recycling. That very low target was set at a time when we weren't sure what was happening with the implementation of the regulations, the new regulations, the waste management regulations in response to Scottish Government's zero waste plan, and it was obviously set quite low in terms of what we thought might be considered in terms of the new definitions for recycling. We've increased the target this year now that we know what the definitions are in relation to our performance under the kind of new measurement system. What I would say in terms of the comments about being one of the lowest authorities in terms of recycling, it was an issue that came up at the start of the summer in terms of figures that were published by SEPA, and it did show under the new process of measuring this PI that we were the second lowest authority in terms of recycling, and previously we had been one of the highest. What the figures then go on to tell is that we're also one of the fourth highest authorities for recovery. So it's a different way to define in terms of what we're doing with the processing of the waste as to how it's defined as recycling or how it's defined as recovery when it comes out of the eco-deco plant in terms of the waste streams and the products that come off that and what we can further do with those in terms of recycling, in terms of solid recovered fuel. What the figures from SEPA at the same time also showed that we were the sixth lowest authority for putting volumes to landfill, and that's always been something that we've been able to perform quite well on. So it is a bit of a change in the way that the recycling rate's measured. The target is a bit low in terms of it was set at a time when we weren't sure what the impact of the regulations would be. And we've sorted that, increased that in terms of the commissions in the later report we'll consider in this committee.
Councillor Levi, come back.
Yeah, appreciate what Stephen's saying. Obviously, I know why the eco-deco plant was built, and that the targets have changed since we went down that particular route. But presumably, you're talking about the energy from waste component which comes out of the eco-deco plant, and therefore, I wonder what's going to be the effect in the future, where we're actually segregating at the doorstep, as opposed to producing a fuel flock at the eco-deco plant, which are then feeding into energy from waste. We've got two competing tensions effectively within our waste system, if you like. How do you actually square that particular circle?
Yeah, I think in terms of if we're looking at source segregated collection and the kind of recycling benefits of that, it's very much seen in terms of the Scottish Government's policy is that we need to consider waste as a resource, and only once we've exhausted all the possibilities of reuse, recycling, or diversion that it is ultimately becomes a waste product that you do something else with. And we're obviously, in terms of the council strategy, is very much trying to minimise what we send to landfill. I think if we were looking at the source segregated collection system, we would increase the value of that waste in terms of the recyclables, whereas at the present time, a lot of them probably go into the waste stream that aren't picked up at the household waste recovery centres. You enter into the waste stream and yes, they're pulled back out again, but there's a certain amount of contamination in that process. There will still be some elements, even if we were recycling at the front end, there will still be some elements that will go through the process and we won't be able to maximise and capture everything. And it's reckoned that there will still be some content that will have a value as a fuel. In terms of the kind of commercial side of that, the kind of value of the fuel kind of very much varies in terms of what the market demands at that time. And quite often there's a need to move that on to producers at no cost or at the cost of haulage. Again, that's very much the commercial side of the contract, and it's something that's dealt with by our contractor through the PFI. So that yes, there could be a reduction in terms of the calorific value of the fuel, but the gain is that there's a higher value in the recycled material and taking glass out and putting it back to glass, metals back out to metals in terms of that reuse cycle, rather than say the glass becoming an aggregate as an end product of the eco-deco process and then just been lost to the system completely.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, Chair, the new regulations paint a very complicated and complex picture, but I can assure members that we've thought this through very carefully, and as I say, we'll come with papers and you'll see the whole picture. There is no way that eco-deco won't perform in the future. It doesn't affect the performance of eco-deco. What it affects is the potential capacity that will go through eco-deco, and there are other ways that we can address that as a council with our other council colleagues. So there is a bigger picture, a holistic picture to look at, but it's a story that builds on the success we've had so far, but very much concentrates on what we call closed-loop recycling.
Thanks for that. So, all going well, we'll have that report sometime in November, all going well. Recommendation 2.1, scrutinise the Plan and Environment Services Performance 2011-12 set out in Appendices 1. Carol, could I just ask you to give us a brief note of that, please?
Thank you, Chairman. What I've picked up from the debate is that literally having scrutinised and noted the action being taken, you've received a number of assurances and clarification. First of all, the clarification on the role of environmental health in neighbour noise complaints, with recording equipment now being transferred and 6 staff transferred to the ASBO team. You've received assurances on the continued intent to improve in planning applications and development management, and the priority that's being given to this by the Director's Management Team. You've received information on an outline of the new performance measures being proposed nationally, and details of that will be circulated to members. Also challenged the impact of the reduction from 7 to 3 in the democratic arrangements. You've noted the changes potentially in workload that will come from extensions to schools, etc., not being incorporated. And again, the other challenge we made was in respect to PDRs, which have been nil. We've received the assurances that this is a matter of reporting that the service will change from SDRs to PDRs. There was a training front end to that, but the whole process will now be completed by the end of December. You've also debated and received some challenges in respect of the household waste and recycling, noting that it's the lowest recycling in mainland Scotland, but the fact that you need to look at what is now a complex picture and new regulations, and that there will be a report which will set out the council's arrangements into a future meeting of the committee.
Thanks for that, Carol. Well summarised. Yep. Okay, recommendation 2.2, agree the Plan Environment Service Business Plan for 2012 to 15, included at Appendix 2. Councillor Smith?
I wasn't aware of it. I know we're jumping between the performance and the business plan. I wasn't sure we were dealing with an order, but I'm quite keen just to get some more information on the cut in the target for supporting the creation of new start-up businesses. Obviously, the previous target, as I said earlier, was 450. We got 536 in the last year, but I think that target for this year seems to have been reduced to 400. It seems to appreciate that it was mentioned earlier this was a national target, but it does seem at a time of recession we should be doing more to support start-up and new businesses, not less. I'm also interested to know what happened to the target for sustaining existing businesses. We previously had a target of 150, but that seems to be dropped from the actual business plan.
The business plan targets here reflect our new contract that we'll have in place from January, and some significant changes in our approach there. The reason the startup figure is lower is because we have built in, both through the national element of the contract and the local element, a higher level of support for existing businesses. And that was based on a lot of feedback we received from, as part of evaluation of the business gateway services. Bear in mind, this is the first time the council's had complete control in directing that element of the contract. The previous one we had was inherited. So whilst there's still a strong focus on startups, which is very important, we feel also, though, to be assisting existing businesses to grow is just as important as part of the programme. The issue of sustaining business is captured actually in the second bullet point, or the second indicator, number of customers accessing local advisory services. I'm suggesting 90 there as the start. That is the terminology that's used in the new national contract to report on sustaining a business. What we found in the previous the performance report, a very high figure against our performance, and that's because the way things are calculated at a national level reflected an easier output, if you like. That's hence the reason there's a very high figure in there. What we now have, I think, are more realistic targets, more robust targets, and ones which reflect the need to support business startup, but an absolute need to support business growth as well.
Just reading that, though, doesn't seem to reflect that in the targets we've set. If we accept, therefore, the reason for the reduction of 450 to 400 is that we're moving more in the direction of sustaining existing businesses. The previous target was to sustain 150 businesses through positive intervention, and we've got a value of 522. But the new target seems to be number of customers accessing local advisory services, and we've only got a target of 45. But we do have a target of 5 young enterprise programme starts with. So just reading that doesn't seem to me to be an increase. In what way is that basically an increase in support to existing businesses? Because it doesn't read like that when you look at the actual plan.
It's because it's the quality and level of support to be provided. In the previous contract, the way this was captured was effectively saying that a business can interact in a workshop or have a one-to-one advisory meeting, and that would be counted under the targets of sustaining a business. We don't feel that's appropriate to get in terms of how we move forward and provide a proper sustainable support service. Therefore, what we've built into the new contract is a much more even balance between startup advisors and business growth advisors, and that the figure there that we're quoting will be much more about making a sustained improvement with a business that we can track better and actually come back and report on a target that we feel is actually going to be making a difference, as opposed to a target which was previously more about output rather than the stronger outcome. So there's whilst the targets have changed significantly, and I appreciate possibly could have explained this better in the business plan, this certainly is, this will reflect a much stronger service in terms of our overall business support and business gateway programme.
Councillor Garris.
Aye, forgive me, Chairman. I don't want to be too project specific, but old attitudes die hard. Reference in this report, and there was reference, I think, in an earlier report to the Council cooperating with such as the Forestry Commission. The project I would like to flag up is the Dark Skies Park. I'm becoming increasingly concerned, Chairman, that this Council seems incapable of grasping the potential, that the development of this particular project has for not only for Dumfries and Galloway as a whole, but particularly for the western part of Dumfries and Galloway, an area which needs all the support that it can get. And I would be interested if Mr. Green can offer any comments at this moment in time as to just exactly where we are with working in a meaningful and constructive fashion with the Forestry Commission to take this project forward for the maximum benefit of Dumfries and Galloway. Posing the question, Chairman, what Freen gets is no loss, and I'm from East Ayrshire originally, but to me it's hugely significant that they appear in fact to have seen the potential, and they're working hard to develop infrastructure at the north end of Loch Doon to capitalise on this designation. Thank you.
Two or three elements to this. One is that we work very hard with the Forest Commission, very closely with them in terms of tourism, and they're very much part of the tourism strategy group we have, and promoting dark skies falls within that remit. So within, for example, the work we do with Visit Scotland, Forest Commission influence and bring to the table the dark skies project as part of that. So we support very well in terms of tourism. In terms of the Caroctree development, and in terms of the new development there, we're very much involved with them in terms of promoting that as a base from which a lot of the dark skies activity would come out from. And in terms of the overall, in terms of the biosphere, the dark skies forms a central part of that. We also have started to set up more regular meetings with Forest Commission to make sure we're getting these linkages better. And I think that was a point made at a previous P&E committee, that we needed to get these linkages better, and we're doing so. So I feel we're doing well. I think there's been some significant progress made in terms of dark skies recently, particularly in terms of some of the events that have been held, and I feel that we are very well in line with using dark skies to promote Dumfries and Galloway.
Thanks for that. Thank you. Okay, we'll go back to recommendation 2.2. Do we have any further questions regarding the business plan? We're going in. Okay, Carol.
Thank you. In respect to the business plan, I did hear Mr. Green say that it could describe better the business planning targets or the business support targets. I don't know whether members are accepting the business plan or accepting it with a better explanation.
I think it was Councillor Smith that made the point in the first place, and you referred back to how it was described within the report. So maybe we could pose that question to you first, Councillor Smith.
I think it's quite a good general point. I mean, there's quite a lot of performance indicators. There's one there, for example, developer contribution, supplementary guidance. I don't know what that is, but I see we've got a target of 95%. There's actually quite a few that I could go through and ask. I think just generally a lot of the KPIs aren't explained in any sort of detail, but it's a general point. It's a point I think I've raised with other business plans that have came before committees as well. So there is a general point there about, particularly when you change a KPI, that an explanation for the new KPI. There's not a lot of detail on that.
I think maybe from a general point of view, then, in future when business plans are come in front of us, should we take a policy that we could have done it anyways, but come forward with questions like that, so we're well prepared, even in as far as officers coming back and giving us support, in as far as being able to address it at the committee on the day. So we've got something pre-written already for which is acceptable to each member who bring that question forward. But as far as today's concerned, well, Councillor Smith, unless if you've got an amendment that you'd like to move, we could consider that. But other than that, we've got nothing in front of us. Okay, 2.2. Agree the planning environment services business plan for 2012 to 15, including Appendix 2. Okay, thanks very much for that. 12:25. Lunch is here. We'll break for lunch. We'll come back at 5 to 1. Thank you. Environment Service Committee. Hope you all enjoyed your lunch. We'll moving on to item number 8, which is Stranraer Task Force, elected member representation on that. Do you have anything to add to this report, Speedy?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Thanks very much for that. Members' questions. Councillor Geddes.
Well, I certainly have, sir. As far as I'm concerned, 2 members represents to me a democratic deficit. I want to see that increase to 4 members. That this is a strategic project. It's a strategic project of particular importance to the western part of this region. This is the strategic committee. I would expect to see you and the vice chair of this committee as 2 of the 4 members, chair of the area committee as 3rd member, and if he's prepared to accept the nomination, I would have no problems in nominating Councillor Foster as the 4th member from this committee onto that task force. My understanding, sir, is in fact that feelers have already been put out, and there would be no problems, as it were, from the Scottish Government or anyone else for that matter, in increasing the number from 2 to 4. So I would so move, Chairman.
Were you indicating to second that?
Yeah, I think that sounds about fair, Chair. I would second that.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Just before I come to yourself, Councillor Lever, Councillor Foster's wanting to come in and seeing you be nominated, you can take precedence.
Well, I'm flattered by the good faith that's put in me, Chair, but I'm unaware what this task force does. It's been in existence for a year. Alex Salmon came down and opened the new terminal at Cairn Ryan, announced it first I'd heard of it, and apart from subsidising train fares, nothing really has come out of it that I'm aware of. Now, I'm a busy man like everybody, or the ladies are too, but we're all busy people sitting in here. I'm quite happy to go to things that benefit the ward I represent, but I'm unsure what they do. I'm flattered, as I say, that I've been nominated. I will accept the nomination with the condition that I reserve my position to see what they actually come up with, because to be quite honest, if they're doing nothing and achieving nothing and meeting in Edinburgh and it's just a soap to the whole regeneration of Stranraer, I will come back off it. But in the meantime, I'm happy to accept it. Just a throw in, there are 6 members who represent Stranraer, but if it's got to come from this committee, and having just had a flick down the front, Roberta and I are the only 2 here that are elected to represent Stranraer, so I accept it. But with the reservation, I may or may not be on it for a long time. If that's acceptable to the committee, I'm happy to accept it.
Councillor Lever.
Yeah, I think obviously this is of major importance to Stranraer, is the redevelopment, which has been making very slow progress for quite a long time. And as Councillor Foster says, it is of importance to all the members who represent Stranraer. And therefore, I think, given that not all members will turn up at all meetings, that all 3 members of the Stranraer ward and all 3 members of Weekton ward be representatives, and we ask the Scottish Government to actually allow that to happen.
Councillor Smith.
I'm quite happy to second that, Chair. I think a substantial part of the waterfront actually covers the Stranraer and North Rins ward. In fact, the vast majority of people who are impacted by the waterfront in that locality live within the Stranraer and North Rins ward. But obviously, because of the makeup of this committee, and that's nothing we can do about it, there are no councillors from Stranraer and North Rins actually on PH&E. I don't see any reason at all why PH&E has to be the only committee that makes recommendations on this. This is not an outside body. This is not a council committee. This is a Scottish Government task force, and it's up to the Scottish Government to invite who they choose. And I'm quite happy to recommend that basically, I think Councillor Mail mumbling in the corner there, it's not an outside body at all. This council doesn't have the authority to appoint people who have any agreement. It's actually a task force set up by the Scottish Government. I understand he seconded the motion earlier without actually knowing what he was seconding. But the reality is, this is a task force set up specifically by the Scottish Government. It's obviously chaired by the Minister. I think Councillor Foster makes a valid point that the meeting on the 27th of September took place in Edinburgh rather than Stranraer, and the Minister's acknowledged the fact that she hasn't actually been to Stranraer before, but is chairing a task force about Stranraer. So I think it is important that these meetings take place in Stranraer, but I think it's also important that all the members in the Stranraer area are represented and invited to attend these meetings and actually to be able to take part in those meetings. So I would second Councillor Lever's motion that the 3 members from Stranraer and North Rins ward and the 3 members from Wigton West ward, we ask the Scottish Government to invite those members to attend and participate within the task force. This is an issue of significant importance to Stranraer. and it should involve everybody in Stranraer, not just a select few.
Councillor Lever, can you just ask you just to remind us exactly what the wording was, and as far as your amendment was, please?
Basically, to request the Scottish Government to appoint all 3 members of the Stranraer and the 3 members of the Wigton West to be representatives on this task force.
Okay, we have Councillor Dempster.
Can I just endorse that, Chair? I mean, I'm hoping that soon we'll have a regeneration strategy brought forward that's looking at the issues in Upper Nithsdale. And I would expect all members to that ward to be represented. It's absolutely diabolical that anybody should be excluded from something that's so important and fundamentally important to the area of Stranraer.
Thank you. We've got a motion and an amendment on the table. We've got the vote, please.
Thank you. Can I just confirm that both on the motion and amendment, if I can just ask the officer just to confirm that the council is being asked to respond and make recommendations on elected member membership. There's nothing in either the motion or the amendment that is against the terms of what Scottish Government request has made to us.
That's correct.
Thank you, Chairman. Then, on the basis, then we have 2 competent motion amendment. We have the motion put forward by Councillor Geddes, seconded by Councillor Mail, which is that this council going back to the Scottish Government, looking for 4 members to be on elected members on the task group. These being the chairman and vice chairman of this committee, the area committee chairman, and Councillor Forster, recognising the points that Councillor Forster has made in respect of there needs to be real benefit. He would initially accept the nomination, but he would actually reserve his position.
Chair, clarification before Ms Henshaw goes to the vote. Are we restricted to members of the PHE committee or not?
I'm not sure if that's Carol or Ewan. Maybe is it who would advise on that? Ewan. Are we restricted? Councillor Foster's question was: are we restricted to the membership of this committee coming from PHE, of the task force? Sorry, to coming from PHE.
I've put forward this report on the basis of the responsibility for the project being with this strategic committee.
Councillor Geddes.
Chair, as a mover of the motion, let me repeat, I'm quite clear as to why I moved what I did. At the end of the day, this is a hugely strategic project, not only for Dumfries and Galloway, but particularly for the west of the region. This is the strategic committee at the end of the day. And there's been a custom and a tradition in the past that these projects lie in and tend to lie into the strategic committee. And it's for that reason, and for no other reason, let me make it clear that I would expect you and the Vice Chair, as Chair and Vice Chair of this strategic committee, to be part of that task force. And as I've said, 2 members, in my opinion, represent a democratic deficit. And that's why I suggested the Chair of the Wigton Area Committee, and I've also chosen to nominate Councillor Forster. And let me say for the record, sir, I can well understand and empathise with Councillor Forster's sentiments, and if he feels at the end of the day that it's not delivering, he's perfectly entitled to take the stance that he's indicated he would. So that's the reasoning behind my motion. Thank you.
Thank you for that. It is, I understand what you're saying, it's there by default anyways. Okay, Carol, we'll go to the roll call.
Thank you. Then just to confirm, and I think the officer did respond to the question I raised in respect of competency, that it was appropriate, that both the motion and amendment are something that could be put forward to the Scottish Government in respect to the nominations. We have a motion put forward by Councillor Geddes, seconded by Councillor Mail, which is that we make representations to the Scottish Government, the task force, representation from this council in respect of members, with the chairman and vice chairman of this committee recognising the strategic importance of this particular task force, and also then the area committee chairman and Councillor Forster, and we'll be recording the points made in respect of the reservations made by Councillor Forster. The amendment by Councillor Lever, seconded by Councillor Smith, is to go back to the Scottish Government and look to all 3 members of the Stranraer and Rinsbourne ward, and also the Wigton Westbourne ward, which would actually be 6 local elected members to be on the task force. Members happy? They understand the motion and the amendment?
Just from an absolute point of clarity, what Councillor Foster said and what you referred to there is not part of the motion.
For clarity too, Chair, am I entitled to vote in this? As coming up both ways? Or do I declare an interest, or what do I do?
The interest is issue of the interest is always for a member, but the fact that somebody is named in a motion amendment has not precluded a member from voting in the past. I can just apologise to Councillor Ogilvie. The voting sheet I have didn't have your name on, so don't worry, you're right at the end. So I know I've got a record for missing members in votes, so my apologies, but at least I got it right this time, so my apologies. Okay, so the motion then is before the amendment is the 6 local members. Chairman.
Motion.
Vice Chairman. Councillor Dempster. Councillor Forster. Councillor Geddes. Councillor Lever. Sorry. Thank you. Councillor Mayo. Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Peacock. Councillor Prentice. Councillor Smith. Councillor Tuckfield. Councillor Wood. Councillor Ogilvie. The motion is carried by 8 votes to 6, there being 14 members present. On that basis, the motion has been carried, and this council will be asking the Scottish Government to accept the nomination of 4 elected members, being the Chairman and Vice Chairman of this committee, the Area Committee Chairman, and Councillor Forster.
Thank you, Carol. If I can ask you, Steve, just to come up, just in anticipation of the next item. Item number 9 is Local Development Plan Update Report. Do we have anything to add to the report, please?
Chair, we have nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I'll open it up to the floor for questions. And do we have any questions on item number 9, Local Development Plan Scheme? Sorry, Local Development Plan Update. Councillor Tuckfield.
It's not so much a question as an observation. I look forward to seeing it online, I think it's January 13th, and one of my points I hope will be met within this plan is that cognizance is taken on the pressure on housing in rural areas. I hope that some of my hopes will be met within this plan.
So I suppose, Steve, on the back of that, what's the process for members? Because it often comes up as the accessibility to affordable housing in a rural situation. If as this moves forward, I know it's not directly implicit in here, but as the local development plan progresses, how would members try and address that?
Well, Chair, essentially it would be through the policies of the new plan, and we will be holding a seminar open to all elected members before the proposed plan goes to full council in November. I think the date for the seminar has already been put in the members' diary, and I would strongly urge all members that are able to come along to that seminar, and we can spend time with you, running you through the strategy, the vision, and the policies, proposals, and site allocations for the proposed plan before we present them to full council, bearing in mind the time constraints that are going to be on us at full council.
Okay, thanks very much for that. No more questions coming from the floor. Councillor Lever.
Although it's not actually numbered, reference is made to the council adopting the interim planning policy on wind energy development. Has that actually been supported by the Scottish Government and adopted by them, endorsed by them, particularly given the frequency in which Scottish ministers seem to overturn decisions of this council in terms of wind farm developments? That's just an observation, and I'd like to reply to that at some point. But in terms of the working group, we've discussed that within the Labour group, and our feeling is this should be a subcommittee rather than a working group, a subcommittee of possibly a PH&E based on proportionality, which would then publish minutes of the meetings and would be subject to public scrutiny in terms of that, which would be much more effective in terms of democracy. And I think also as part of the review of standing orders and committee responsibilities, perhaps we should look to see whether the parent committee for this subcommittee should either be this committee or whether it should be the Planning Applications Committee, given their role nowadays. So I therefore propose there should be a subcommittee of PHE initially.
Chair, yes, if I could comment on a couple of those points that have been raised by Councillor Lever. First of all, in relation to the desire to have a subcommittee, I mean, this isn't seen as being necessary to have a decision-making body. And I think Appendix 1 sets out the purpose and remit of the Member Officer Working Group, and it's a mechanism that has worked well to date in terms of achieving that informal engagement with elected members, given the scope of the local development plan allows a lot more time to be devoted to discussing particular issues, but it's not seen as being necessary to have a decision-making body to carry out that function. In fact, the decision-making should firmly rest with PH&E as the parent committee, and ultimately for council in terms of the final version of the local development plan.
Councillor Wood, then Geddes.
It's with regard to the participation statement and its concerns raised about consultation and the window of opportunity for people within the communities to engage. And I notice that it does state that it would be in January 2013. Is that the whole of January? Are we talking a part of January? Can we extend it so it doesn't get caught up in New Year, Hogmanay and such like? And what sort of procedures are you putting in place to make sure that community councils definitely get receipt and acknowledgement of such consultation?
Certainly the intention is that the next round of consultation, which is based on the publication of the council's proposed plan, would commence sometime in January and would run for a minimum of 6 weeks. There is a statutory minimum requirement of 6 weeks. That can be extended, but what I would advise is to consider the impact that any further extension beyond the 6 weeks would have on our target of trying to get the plan adopted by the end of 2013. I think the other point to make is that there have already been some very significant public consultation and engagement activities built into this process. First of all, with the Call for Sites process, where landowners and developers were invited to submit proposals to us on the basis of developments. We then went through a public consultation process on the main issues report. We then did an additional round of consultation earlier this year based on the options available for site development, and there was a large-scale public consultation undertaken for that. Also included in that process were some of the key policy issues that had arisen from the initial main issues report consultation, particularly, I think, going back to the point that that Councillor Tuckfield was raising with regard to things like housing in the countryside. So there has already been a number of opportunities for public engagement, and all of that is reflected in essentially where we are now. When the report is brought forward to full council in November, there will be a full outline of all of the points raised during those public consultation processes and the proposed council response to those, and how they have or haven't been incorporated into the proposed plan. So there's already been a considerable degree of work, and in fact the consultation period that starts in January is essentially a statutory period for people to mount or raise objection to the plan, which are then fed into Scottish ministers for them to adjudicate on. Andrew, I don't know if you can add some more detail on the public consultation dates.
In terms of the public consultation, it's probably worth saying, particularly in relation to community councils, that clearly there's been recent elections on community councils, so obviously if members agree this report today, the development plan scheme can be communicated to the new community councils as a starting point, We can certainly follow that up following the full council meeting at the end of November, and as soon as possible after that date, provided members agree the proposed plan, we could notify community council to say that there will be a, we will know by that stage the exact dates of the public consultation events. So, as I say, there's a couple of opportunities to flag these up to community councils to give them advance warning of it.
Yes, no, that was actually the very point I was trying to drive forward here, is the fact we have had these elections, and in the past our systems have let us down for whatever reason, in that we haven't tracked community council engagement as to whether it responded to the information that's been sent out to them. And I wanted to make sure that we could maybe be a bit more robust about how we track that and make sure that they have definitely received it, because when you're on the ground at any community council, guaranteed one of them will claim that they've never heard.
On the same subject, Chairman?
Same subject, going on.
Thank you. Just briefly, if we're going to communicate with these new community councils, they may well have a different view or a different perspective on what would be included in the local development plan. We need them to be aware whether or no it's too late to put forward proposals to be included in the local development plan. They need to be aware of that. They need to know not only we're consulting with them, but where the opportunities lie. So they need to know whether or no, because there's a little point in them starting to debate the likelihood of development in the community if we've already gone past that stage now. And I wouldn't mind knowing myself where we are with that, so it's because we've won tonight.
In terms of this detailed point, clearly there has been engagement with community councils. There are new community councils, but as Steve said, the decisions that the council's taken at the end of November are really agreeing the council's proposed plan, which is put on deposit. And really, the new community councils, really their own role then is really to, they could actually support the proposed findings the council's come up with, or they could make objections and suggest alternative comments. Clearly, at this stage of the process, those are the two options that are available to them.
I suppose
sure, that's not very clear.
But I suppose
they
just
can
refer,
make objections.
Just referring back to the 6 weeks consultation in January. I mean, that's another point. I would imagine that's another point in time where community councils have felt strong enough could indicate whether for, against, or how the plan goes forward. But Councillor Dempster, then you, Andrew.
Aye, which wasn't, Andrew's explanation wasn't very clear. They can support if you like, or they can object. Can they put forward proposals for inclusion of alternative sites, given that the new community council will have a different view maybe than the previous one?
Well, there's nothing to stop that happening. They could do that as part of an objection, for example, to a proposed site allocation. If they think that there is a better site within their community, then they could object to what might be in our proposed plan on the basis that there's actually a better site available. So they would be able to do that. What the stage that we're at with the LDP now is that we are beyond the stage of considering completely new sites into the process, because they have to go through a full technical assessment process. So if they were to raise an issue as part of an objection, it would actually then be considered by the ministers as part of their consideration of the plan and all of the objections that are outstanding.
I just think for clarity as well, in specific rural locations, my understanding, Steve and Andrew, is that in the smaller settlements, I think it's around about 70, 76, something like that, we look to remove the actual settlement boundary, and it'll be on a case-by-case as it comes forward in its relation as far as how its close proximity to the settlement. Is that right? I think particularly, Rowan, because I think Jim's talking about rural housing.
I think you're talking about settlements within set maps, and the main issues report consulted on that. Essentially, we've moved from a situation where we had 120 villages and towns and settlements within set maps. I think the main issues report is about 48 settlements that will have an inset map in the LDP. So there will be criteria-based policies for assessing housing development in villages, and that was subject to the main issues report consultation.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Councillor Geddes then Smith.
Well, can I move as an amendment, Chairman, that recommendation 2.1 as detailed in the report be adopted?
Okay, I'll second that. Councillor Smith.
I'm not a property developer, Chair, so I won't declare any interest in this particular item, but I do support the concept of a subcommittee. I don't think anybody here is suggesting that a subcommittee should be making decisions. The reality is this committee doesn't even make decisions on the local development plan. That will ultimately be a decision for full council to make, so I don't see the difference between a subcommittee. I think the issue about a subcommittee is that it's open, it's transparent, the papers are available to the public, and these meetings are in the public domain. I think an issue like this should be open and transparent. I'm a bit confused by the suggestion that somehow a working group can spend more time on something than a subcommittee. Well, the reality is it depends on the length of the meeting, how much time you spend on something, and whether it's called a working group or subcommittee doesn't matter. It's about openness, it's about transparency, and it's also about the fact that the structure of working groups means that there are actually councillors in this council that are excluded from membership of working groups because of the makeup of the individual working group. Nobody's excluded other than the basis of proportionality from a subcommittee, but members of this council are excluded from working groups simply based on whether or not they're a member of a political group, and I think that that's undemocratic. But I come back to the point, I think a subcommittee is more transparent, it's more open, and I think we have to be transparent and open when it comes to this issue.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Smith's stolen my thunder there, and I'll wait till you're finished, Chair. I thought you were chairing the meeting there. Sorry.
I'm chairing the meeting.
Well, yeah, multitasking, obviously, but I was just going to speak in favour of Councillor Lever's motion and seconding it. And based on what Councillor Smith says about the subcommittee being based on proportionality, I think there is a perception out there this administration has the ethos of doing things in secret, and you're doing nothing, absolutely nothing, by putting things, hiding things behind closed doors, not open to public scrutiny, working groups, and making, whether you like it or not, the public perception is you make decisions behind closed doors with this working groups and seminars. If you had a subcommittee, it would be open and transparent, it would be open to public scrutiny, and it would have proper minutes, and that's what you call accountability. So therefore I was quite happy to second Councillor Lever's motion.
Okay, because Carl had to leave the room for a second there. When she cropped up, you need some clarification.
Thank you. Apologies, I'm afraid I was first on call for a care call, but I've put the call through to the second on call. I have a motion which is put forward by Councillor Lever, seconded by Councillor Nicholson, which is within the powers of this committee, which is to establish a single issue ad hoc subcommittee. I will require for this to be totally competent, for it to be clear about what the remit is and what the delegations are for this subcommittee. Obviously, within the report, what you've got is described remit for the working group. I understand that Councillor Geddes may well have made an amendment.
I have made an amendment that's been duly seconded.
So we have the amendment then put forward by Councillor Geddes, seconded by the Chairman, which is to effectively go with the recommendations as they are in Report 9, which is 2.1 and 2.2. If therefore I could just ask Councillor Lever, in respect of his motion, if he could confirm the remit and delegations of the committee.
Could you use your mic, please? Could you use your mic, please?
Right. The remit of the working group, the subcommittee would be the same as the working group. Removing the working group will not be a decision-making group, and proportionality, based on proportionality with membership of 11.
Thank you, Chairman. I can then confirm what we have as a motion put forward by Councillor Lever, seconded by Councillor Nicholson, which is within the powers of this committee to establish a single issue ad hoc subcommittee, which effectively is the remit and purpose outlined in Appendix 1, page 195, which is just recognising that it will have within its delegations a certain amount of decision making which is only appropriate for that committee, and it will have a membership of 11 based on proportionality. The amendment put forward by Councillor Geddes, seconded by the Chairman, is effectively to go with the recommendations at 2.1 and 2.2. Can I just confirm if everybody's happy and they understand the motion and the amendment? Chairman. Councillor McClung? Councillor Dempster? Forster's not present. Councillor Geddes? Councillor Lever? Councillor Mayle? Councillor Nicholson? Councillor Peacock? Councillor Prentice? Councillor Smith? I like the side whisper. It's amazing what the sound system does. Councillor Tuckfield? Councillor Wood? Councillor Ogilvie? We have the amendment being carried by 8 votes to 5, there being 13 members present. Accordingly, in respect of Report 9, the committee has decided to re-establish a member officer working group and also to agree the 4th edition development plan scheme attached to Appendix 3 for publication and distribution to all stakeholders.
Thanks for that, Carl. Item number 10 is Infrastructure Commissioning Service Strategic Commissions. Do you have anything to add to the report, please?
Nothing to add, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions from the floor regarding this? Councillor Geddes?
Two issues, sir. We're talking about various commissions here. It mentions these indicators are capable of being disaggregated at area level. Can I move, Chairman, that where that is shown in the appendices, that this committee today takes a decision that all of these will, in fact, be disaggregated, all these indicators will be disaggregated to area level, to allow area committees, in fact, to carry out a scrutiny and performance management role in relation to these particular issues. That's the first point, sir. And the second point is that I notice that in most, if not all, of the appendices, secondary performance indicators do not have targets set, but will be reviewed at the end of the commission period to provide context for the key performance indicators. Can I ask, Chairman, why do secondary performance indicators not have targets set?
Is that for you, Stephen?
Yes, the issue with the secondary performance indicators is very much the key performance indicators were seen as the kind of primary indicators that were reasonably hard and fast in terms of driving the Commission and the objectives of the Commissions. The secondary performance indicators were more seen as a tool for officers in terms of managing the Commissions, and in certain areas we're really just flagging up the need possibly to start collecting this data to see how robust the data would be, and it might be that in time that it could become a key performance indicator if we thought the mechanisms were in place and appropriate for collecting that data. So it's very much more about the kind of understanding of the Commission, as well as monitoring the financial side, just giving a bit more information on some of the other criteria in terms of the operations. On the disaggregation, yes, we've identified within each of the Commissions what can be reported at an area level, and I understand that that's certainly the commitment we were at the turn of the year reporting to area committees on these Commissions in terms of the progress. And I understand that will continue to be the process.
Thanks, Chairman. I must confess I'm not entirely convinced by Mr Herriot's explanation in relation to secondary performance indicators, but I'm certainly not going to die in the ditch for it. And if colleagues around this in the chamber today are content to leave it as I'll fall in line with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
So, Chair, are we confident that these commissions, and the base of the commissions and the content of what we're asking organisations to do will ensure that we actually meet the targets that we've just set in the business plan that we've developed earlier? I mean, I'm kind of conscious that we had a discussion earlier about the issue around recycling and curbside, although I appreciate that for 2012-13 it's a 0% target. So I assume that no decisions will be taken in the next 12 months during those commissions on the issue of recycling and curbsides, because obviously these commissions exclude the implications for those particular decisions.
Yeah, I mean, the commissions are probably quite a kind of a dynamic document. I would see effectively we've been running with these commissions for 6 months in terms of the length of time it's taken to get them before this committee with a number of delays. But you know, they are dynamic documents. I think this year something that both myself and Charles is representing DG First as the kind of primary service delivery agent for most of the commissions. See that there's a need for a bit more kind of interaction and dialogue in time. You know, that we might need to tweak the commissions in during the year, particularly with respect to the finances and how we're managing on that. If we have potential for overspends, how we manage that. Do we need to shave on one commission to deal with an issue in another commission? So I think I see them very much as being a kind of dynamic document, a kind of management document. They should certainly reflect what we have in the business plan that's been presented earlier in this committee in terms of the aspirations of planning, house, environment services, and that should be reflected within the commissions.
If there's tweaks and adjustments made, I take it that gets reported back to committee at some point?
I think if there's significant adjustments, it would be something that I would take advice on in terms of reporting back to committee. It might be if minor variations in terms of the budgets, the revenue budgets, that might be something that's reported at the appropriate time later on. If we're looking at shifting targets, then I would imagine that's something we would want to run through the committee. If for operational reasons the targets set and the performance indicators were not realistic or couldn't be realised.
Councillor Geddes.
Thanks very much, Chairman. I have two specifics, sir, in relation to Appendices 8 and 10. First one, Appendix 8. It says in the last paragraph in box 4, page 261, resources required for headstones, safety inspections, monumental structures, boundary walls and trees are a budget pressure. My understanding, sir, is that in Wigtonshire at least, this council may not be carrying out any headstone safety inspections in any of their burial grounds. And I would like clarification or otherwise of that, because if we're not as an authority doing that, to me there are real health and safety concerns. I think there's been occasions in the past where not only have people been injured by falling headstones, etc., and particularly children, but you know, in certain instances, if memory serves me correctly, people in fact have lost their lives. That's the first point. And the second point in Appendix 10, sir, this is this issue of providing a street cleansing service. And it's back to the question I raised this morning in relation to building control. Are we not in fact providing a higher standard of service here than we need to? Back again, Chairman, to the law of diminishing returns. Should we not in fact be looking in these circumstances perhaps to, at a time of tight financial constraints, as it were, to perhaps maybe scale back in certain standards in a case such as this? Thank you.
Stephen.
Thank you. In terms of the Commission for the Burial Grounds and Interment Service, we do identify, certainly in discussion with DG First, pressure on the budget with respect to headstone safety inspections. It is identified. It is identified as an improvement action within the Commission itself, and it's something that we'll need to sit down with DG First and go through the detail on. I don't have details of what they currently do in terms of headstone safety inspections. I think effectively in terms of drafting this Commission, they were flagging up that there was an issue, that they were aware that this was an area that they probably weren't operating in or felt that there was enough funding to be able to be active in. And it's something that we will look at through the course of the implementation of this Commission through this year. In terms of the street cleansing and the standards, the performance is well in excess of the target, as Councillor Geddes states, and this in fact forms one of the budget development proposals in terms of reducing the service to meet the national standard. So there is information before members in another forum in terms of addressing that as a particular a way forward.
I wonder, as far as Councillor Geddes' first question, Charles, I wonder if you have any comment in regards to the safety checks in his Wigtown area.
certainly not something I could comment on specifically at this moment in time, but I certainly can get that information to Councillor Geddes if that's what's required. I couldn't speak for all 4 areas.
Councillor Geddes?
Well, I would think with respect, sir, it's an issue which affects or could affect all 47 members of this authority, and I would like to think at the end of the day that we get urgent clarification provided for this. And if in fact that's not the case, if there are no such inspections taking place at the moment, it's imperative that we rectify that and get put in place as a matter of urgency an appropriate and suitably robust inspection system. Because as I've said, the potential consequences simply don't bear. Actually, how it came about, Chairman, is that go to East Ayrshire and you'll see in many's a burial ground headstones laid flat, or you'll see headstones with blue stickers on them, etc. And I was in a graveyard in Mid-Galloway with a constituent and a member of council staff, and I commented in passing about the fact that there was no such that the same scenario wasn't being replicated in our part of the world, and it was as a result of that I got the information that well, we're really not doing it because we don't have the money to do it. And I think that's got to be clarified, and more importantly, if that is the case, Chairman, it's got to be addressed, whether it's in Langham or in Dromore, because that simply isn't acceptable for the so-called responsible authority. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll pick up on that as Carla goes through the actions at the end. We'll just pick up on that and make sure that gets carried out. We have Councillor Dempster, then Prentice.
Thanks, Chair. I think there was a proposal, this is on Councillor Geddes' point, I think there was a proposal to buy a machine or a device that actually picked up headstones and set them in the ground. I think we looked at that, and I don't know whether that was ever brought forward as a proposal from management. No, but certainly there's equipment available if we're willing to purchase it. But the 2 points I was wanting to raise was on page 269, the secondary performance indicators, and I know we've said already we're not doing them, but 2.2, the number of fixed penalty notices issued for dog fouling, littering and fly tipping. I'd be interested to know how effective we are, because it's one of the most contentious areas that we as members deal with, the issue about dog fouling and fly tipping, litter as well. So I'd be interested to know how effective we are being, or how frequently we're actually addressing the matter in a positive way by issuing fixed penalty tickets. So I think maybe at some further or future meeting we could have some numbers on how many fixed penalty notices have been issued, or how we're dealing with that very contentious matter. The other thing is just a simple question, and it's on page 273 on public conveniences. Automated public conveniences, 62,209. Is that because these are manned? It seems to me an excessive amount of money just to maintain automated machines, unless that covers staff costs.
On the automated public conveniences, they're not manned. It's like the public convenience we've got at a number of the car parks, Brooms Road car park being one of them within Dumfries, if you can visualise that. And I think there is an action, that there is a realisation that the cost is quite high, and I think that's tied in with a historic contract. There is an action under this commission to investigate the long-term viability of the automated PCs and see if there's a process by which that can be, the cost can be reduced, or we can withdraw from those contracts. So,
if it's on the same point.
Yeah, well, it's on one of the points that Councillor. Sorry, his name. I was only kidding. It was on the dog fouling and the fly tipping incidents. I think there is a point there that I was actually quite surprised. I asked for information in a certain area, about dog fouling incidents, fixed penalties, and fly tipping as well. And I was quite surprised how many there actually was, because there was a good number of them. But I think that brings up the points that we've made as a committee, maybe in other committees, about how this is publicised, because people out there don't know what's happening there. And every day or every second day, I'll get somebody saying he's doing nothing. And I think the publicity behind this has to be part of the scheme as well. So as I said, I was surprised, pleasantly surprised about how many there was, because there was a good number of them in a certain area.
Councillor Prentice.
Thanks, Chair. Really quite a minor point. It's maybe a point for Carol on page 215. it says, you know, to provide a waste collection service. A, to provide a household waste collection service to all properties that are rated. Does that mean that, apart from places where the operator can't get the lorry turned, does that mean the householder has a right away up top of, Charles will know where I mean, at the top of the Lorg Road, to ask for the council cart to come right up 6 miles to collect his rubbish bag? It's the terminology that concerns me.
Yeah, I think perhaps in the location that Council Prentice relates to, the rubbish is collected from the end of the road where the rubbish vehicle turns. There are community bins provided at the end of the road. It's certainly, there's a pull-out service in some instances where someone's not able to get their refuge to the pickup point, but I don't think we'd go up to every single property. There are exceptions.
I think that's what he's picking up on, the fact that if you read that, to provide a household waste collection service to all properties that are rated for payment of council tax. So therefore, a farm will be rated, yet we don't go up. Well, I think that's the point he's actually picking up on.
The point I was trying to make, Chair, was that if you get Mr. and Mrs. Awkward living 5 miles up a single track road, and you read that, it says to all properties. It would be better if maybe if it said for all properties.
So I've read it in the same way, and I take the point about the 2 and the 4.
We'll clarify that when we get back to the end of this. We'll clarify that and possibly adjust it. I have no more members wishing to speak. We'll go to the recommendations. 2.1 is the agreed infrastructure and commissioning service strategic commission for 2012-13 at appendices 1 to 10. Agreed? Okay, thank you. 2.2, note the key performance indicators for 2011-12 strategic commissions at appendix 11. Right, okay, we'll come back to Carol just on the points for the sake of adjustments. Just make sure we've picked up on all points, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think one of the points was made in respect of the disaggregation of information, but I think the assurance has been given that that would be something that would be happening. All other issues, I think, have been, if you like, picked up and responded, so that they're not material to the decision.
The point that Councillor Prentice picked up in particular, do we need to adjust that within the actual document?
I think that's something that officers can take away.
So we'll delegate that to officers to undertake that, change the 4 and that 2. Councillor Geddes?
What's your decision then, sir, in relation to possibly not carrying out health and safety inspections with the headstones, etc.? How are we disposing of that?
Thank you. I had that as an operational action, and that's where the assurance will happen. So it won't be a matter of the minute, but it will be an operational action.
Thank you very much. Item number 11, which is the winter service policy review, future route review. Do you have anything to add to this report?
Nothing to add at this stage, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. It's open to the floor. Councillor Nicholson, you're first.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased that this report's here, but some of the issues, I know that EMA do certain pathways, just and within the scheme as well, up to the first lamppost, I think it is, just off the roundabout. Is that correct? Within that, and that's why that's red. And for example, at the bottom of Lockside Road, there's the shops at Lockside Road, up to the shops, up to the lamppost there. That's marked in red, which is our first priority. But what I can't understand, and the same it'll include, the shops it'll include, they've got a small bit that is marked in red, which obviously, to keep the shops open. But the main thing is everything else is green, which is a third priority, which realistically won't ever get done. So the shops would be open, but nobody could be able to get to them, if the pathways are never done. So what kind of, if the ones in Linclune, for example, are done by the council and not AME, because it's not part of their highway, what criteria have you used for them kind of areas rather than against the green areas? Why do you keep a shop open when, for example, up Lockside Road, You can, the pathways are third priority if you want. And you've also got 4 schools in that area, which I would have seen as a priority as well, all on that main road.
Yep. I mean, in terms of the approach that's been taken, it's quite different from the carriageway treatment routes development process that we went through last winter and reported on a couple of occasions. In terms of the footway routes, what we've done is we've looked at settlements as a whole and scored them against the criteria that was agreed by members. And that's given us a kind of prioritised list of priority footway treatment areas. What the team that were working on this have then done is they've looked at the likes of the Lincluden Lochside area. They've looked at the existing treatment mapping that we had in terms of the F1, F2 and F3 priorities. And they've looked at some of the features that are on the ground that have scored to give this community a score that takes it into a priority footway rated area. And in the F1, they're primarily looking at the major pedestrian routes within the settlements. Example shopping streets should be considered as F1. And in F2, they're looking at those areas serving other facilities, example, medical facilities. And F3 are to do with the more residential routes. And that really has been the criteria that's been put on looking at a particular community and putting the footway treatment priority on it in detail.
Thank you, Chair. I still can't understand. I understand a bit about the shops and that, and the priorities, but what I can't understand is you've got 4 schools on that road. You've got Lochside Primary, you've got St Ninian's Primary, you've got Marks High Primary, you've got St Teresa's down at the bottom there, which is just across the road from the shops. You've also got other shops, it's actually marked on there, just across from Dunlop Road, which has a post office in it. That isn't treated as a priority area. Behind that as well, you've got in Shirley Road area, behind that, there's medical clinics held there as well. So, and that hasn't even got a green one. But it's fine having that wee bit down at the bottom. There are other shops as well, in the Hawthorne Road. But it's fine having that wee bit there and identified as main priority, but if nobody can get to it, if it is really bad weather and it's the rest of the pathways are treated as a priority 3 if you want, then I find it very pointless regarding that.
I think in terms of the process, there's maybe an opportunity. I know we did this with the carriageway treatment routes. We were sitting with the winter service plan just about ready to be finished printing for this winter season. We should have taken this report to committee over a month ago, and that would have been easier for us to work in kind of changes to the winter plan. I think in terms of the winter plan, if we're looking at further changes beyond what we've tabled in the report, I think we're probably looking at maybe having to, as we did with the carriageway treatment routes, provide members with the opportunity to query some of these areas with us, and we can review that in terms of individual concerns.
You got you, Andrew. Are you wanting another word, Ronnie?
Well, thanks very much for that. There was one other thing I was asked to ask about from Cargan Bridge, if I can find the map. But Cargan Bridge area, Cargan Bridge area has got a map. Thanks. It's got mapped out here round about Cargan Bridge School, and it's one of the. You've got Cargan Bridge Avenue that isn't even on the green route, but I take it these routes were done for bus routes as well. Is it, or is it just basically the pathway?
This is in terms of the scoring. It's looking at the pedestrian usage.
Just the pedestrian.
If we have, an anticipating heavy pedestrian usage because it's on a major bus route, that should have been taken into account. Certainly, for some of the major settlements, the bus rail station has scored as part of the transport interchange to look at the communities themselves.
Yeah, it came off the A711 from the roundabout, and that's what I couldn't understand as well, because basically I was told it was because of the bus route, but the bus route actually goes up Cargan Bridge Avenue, round Drongers Drive, round Cargan Road, back down, then back up Cargan Bridge Avenue, then out the roundabout. But Currinbridge Avenue, which is a lead path to the schools as well, isn't even marked on as a green, it's not F3, which is a main route to the school from the other area.
Okay, pick that up, and any other points, obviously, you can pick up on a personal basis. Councillor Ogilvie, then Dempster, Geddes, then Wood.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to welcome the change from the last set of minutes to the inclusion of Easter eggs. I know we all geared up for the August meeting, unfortunately it didn't go ahead, and you've taken on board some of all the members' concerns, and I'm really pleased to see that in there. Another question, Chair, if you mind, so I welcome that, thanks very much, is we didn't get a chance to test the community resilience last year, because fortunately or unfortunately, we didn't get a lot of snow. It's the impact of the communities. I mean, every community got the chance to get salt bins and path clearers and other stuff, and it's sitting there waiting to be used. Now, what I don't know is how effective that's going to be. I mean, that would overlay on top of this, so it'd be an additional, and I don't know if people have got prescribed routes or it's just down to each local community to do their own wee area or what they think is best. I mean, I don't know if you've given a strategic guidance or anything, it's just an interesting thought, how we overlay that on top of what we've been given today.
In terms of the communities that have expressed an interest in it, we've had either a community council or 5 residents come forward and ask for equipment, and that's been given out over the past couple of years, and I think there's certainly some figures in the report that just how many grip bins we've managed to distribute, and the food waste spreaders. It's very much left up to them to work out the area that they're interested in and treating. I think at the same time, when the team looking at the prioritisation, the F1, F2 and F3 footways for areas, they would look at where there were grip bins already there and where there was the kind of community resilience grip bins were in place. I think it would be quite difficult, and it would be quite a level of detail for an event, as you said, didn't really happen last winter. It's probably quite infrequent that we have the winters of the 2 previous winters in terms of the severity. And I think the 2010 one we reckon was probably close to 1 in 100 years since it only happened once before in the last 100 years of records in terms of the level of severity. And so the system hasn't been tested. I think it would be very difficult to be prescriptive and say what the treatment routes are that a community should do, and then kind of match that up with the treatment routes that we have in the footways here. The exercise that we're probably see value in, almost like that, is the treatment routes into the schools, where we had agreed that with education services before and neighbourhood services within DG First, in terms of prolonged periods of cold weather where we have snow or where we have ice that's not lifting through the day. There is a mechanism by which the routes into the school can be treated, and these need to be revised. Those treatment routes into the school, single school access routes, need to be revised in relation to coming back to one of these treatment routes that we see within the winter service plan that we're proposing. So just to repeat, it's not something we've considered with the communities, but I think particularly if there's areas where there aren't treatments, community councils have taken up the offer of bins and hand spreaders.
Thanks for that, Stephen. I know it's a sort of rhetorical sort of question, but what would be useful, because as local members, if we get a severe winter again, is what's being done and this. What would be useful, and we could do it at local level, Annandale, Nestdale, or site town specific, is see where the location of the salt bins are. So if somebody says, why is this not getting cleared? We'll say, well, it's there and the community is responsible, pass the buck. But no, I'm just joking. I forgot I'm getting taped, haven't I? Can I ask another question? It just occurred to me when you were speaking there, Stephen, was, we raised this before as part of the consultation, is there a different approach to schools now because of the traffic calming measures? So snowplows and other bigger vehicles can't go effectively there. Would it be a more manual approach?
Could I just go back to the grip bins? There is a project to put all of the grip bins on the GIS system so that we can see them. And if there were issues in a particular area, that might be something that we can factor into the decision-making process. And I think it has to be very much, I think doing this footway exercise and communicating that through the report is very much a reactive process. We can do so much planning for it, but we're not going to get snowfall. Very rarely do we get snowfall across the whole region. So resources can move about within an operational area and be reactive. And certainly the data in the GIS will help that in terms of where the community resilience grip bins are. Sorry, could you just remind me the second question? Snow ploughs, yes, and the traffic calming around schools. Yeah, I think the issue there is that it's probably very rarely that we ever get round to putting that kind of level of equipment into residential areas. There are other issues with parked vehicles, and I think if we had, having to dig out access to schools, we might be looking at other methods. Certainly, those routes that have any sort of physical features for traffic calming on them would need to be treated with a certain amount of respect for any sort of ploughing operation.
I think ploughing is the issue, isn't it? It's not so much the greater. We have Councillor Dempster, Geddes, Wood.
Thanks, Chair. Just two first observations about Deer Park Housing Estate and Stank. I'm surprised there's not a footway 2 priority in the whole of the estate, but that's something I'll take up with Stephen anyway. I'll have a chat with him about it. But in the Kirkconnell one, on the colour sheet here, there is no footway prioritisation at all to the health centre, which also includes social work and customer services. So I thought that would have been a key priority treatment route. In fact, the whole of that little estate has no footway treatment at all. I don't have a page for it, Stephen. Next to Dumfries, if that helps. If you look at the map of Kirkconnell, and if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see Killahome Primary School, and there's a circuit right around it. Some of it's footway priority 3 and some of it's footway priority 2. But in the top north end of that school is a road called Nivison or Niviston Road. And where it crosses with Glenamer Road, that's the location of the Mill Hill Centre, which, as I say, includes health, social work staff from the council and customer services centre. And the idea of clearing a footpath between Killahome and Kirkconnell as a primary route, when there's little pedestrian usage on that, and leaving out such a key element, I think, is an oversight. So if you want, I can have a chat with that later on, Stuart, about that. Stephen, sorry about that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Dempster. Councillor Geddes.
Two issues, Chairman. First one is in relation to Whithorn. Castle Hill is the access from George Street, access egress from George Street to the local Whithorn Primary School. As part of Safer Routes to School proposals, we recently implemented or put in a recessed footpath, which extends from it, doesn't extend unfortunately all of the way, 35 metres possibly. I find it strange, to say the least, that should not in fact be taken cognizance of, and some form, or well, I would suggest that a priority 3, F3 ranking afforded to it. As I say, it's on the south side of Castle Hill, between the junction of the George Street and the primary school. That's the first point. Second point, Chairman, going to Newton Stewart, the treatment routes for 2012, I take it, in many instances are simply adhering to what's already been in place, and particularly in relation to category F1, which is the main streets in Newton Stewart. Can I have clarification that that's the case, sir, before I continue with your leave?
In terms of the new treatment routes, it wasn't specifically that they had to replicate or include everything that had been done previously, but certainly what had been done previously, where it was seen to be working, and part of a reasonable process would be considered for inclusion within the existing, the proposed new.
Thanks, Chairman. Well, on that basis, and Mr. Speedy no doubt will know full well what I'm about to say, on that basis I would suggest that it would fit us well to ensure, in fact, that we adhere to our priorities as set out on these maps. And I'll go back to 16th to 19th December 2011 in Newton Stewart, where we had freak, and I mean freak, snowstorm conditions. In fact, the town made the national ITV news at 10 on the basis. And bizarrely, there was next to no snow anywhere else in mid-Galloway. What actually happened was that DG First in the first instance buckled to on the Friday, and they responded. And the rest of the weekend, There are men that were put in standby. And the Sunday morning, going down Arthur Street, which is an F1, I had to walk on the road because you couldn't walk on the pavements. The pavements were a sheet of ice. In fact, I vividly remember a young woman with a small child in a pushchair walking on the other side of the road, getting down past Bank of Scotland buildings, you know, on the pavement. And how on earth she managed to get down there without losing control of herself and the buggy, I will never know. And the point is that as late as Monday afternoon, they were still disgorging. Buses were coming into Dashwood Square and still disgorging people onto what was a solid sheet of ice. Now, in this report, it says, in fact, that depending on other calls and other pressures, you will endeavour to deal with all of these priorities in the fashion set out. It never happened. It never happened in that particular weekend. Minnegaff, for instance, was a total no-go area. People couldn't get out. It was as simple as that. And despite repeated requests, you know, to ask representatives of this authority, particularly DG First, to come along and meet with the Pea Valley Community Council and discuss the issue with them and see, in fact, if we can learn from the experience and deal with it better this time round. It's never happened. The meeting has never taken place because it's been refused. We've got the Community Council elections out of the way on the 4th of October, Chairman. I'll put the marker down now. I'll be back in touch with them and we'll repeat the request. Because that simply, and I would hope that that is no symptomatic of what takes place the length and breadth of Dumfries and Galloway. But what I would say in a Newton Stewart context, Chairman, is that in that particular weekend, last year, December 2011, the people of Newton Stewart and Minnegaff were singularly ill-served by an authority who did not, in my opinion, undertake, in fact, you know, its stipulations as indicated. I'll leave it at that. I derive no satisfaction in having to raise matters like this at committee.
Do you want to make comment, Charles, please? Yep. Do you want to make comment, or do you? Yep.
As I've said, Chairman, I'll be back. I'll get the Community Council. I'll raise it with the Community Council.
Okay, then. We'll leave it at that, Charles. Councillor Wood, then Mail.
Very well. First of all, to endorse what Councillor Dempsey was saying about the health centre at Gallowholme. And furthermore, to actually pick up on where Councillor Ogilvie rightly raised the point about winter resilience and the local communities, what they are doing. I do believe you need to have an oversight on what you've got here, because if you look at Moniaive and you look at Dunska, both those areas are already covered by the communities. Now, it's a pointless exercise having marked areas which are already being done by the communities unless you recognise and know that it's happening. There's no point in sending out squads to areas that are already being treated. So I really do think you have to revisit that and consider where you've got winter resilience, what works they're doing, and work together in a proper partnership.
Thanks for that. Councillor Mail.
Thanks, Chair. I find it strange that, especially in Annandale and Edsel, in terms of Lockerbie and Langham, that the gritting stops before it gets to the very highest point where people have the most danger and problem getting from their houses. Sort of terminates just below the beginning of a housing scheme at its highest, where it gets to its highest point. And I think there really is severe problems there. And last year it certainly wasn't helped by the community helping itself, because the wheelbarrows that was provided, especially the large ones, wouldn't lay the grit and the sand because they were supposed to be for clean and dry salt. So everybody that got one of those just abandoned it because it didn't work. So I'd hope this year that under winter resilience we'll make sure that the equipment that is put out actually does the job. And I'd say I really would like to see some more work done on the Highland, especially that the pavement's gritted there, because they are very dangerous. It's the biggest complaint I certainly get during the winter. People are stuck and can't get out.
Are you okay to take that up at a personal level?
The winter resilience one, Chair, I mean, we need equipment that actually works. Because to provide the barrows that then would not spread the salt because they needed dry salt, and there's no way they're going to put dry salt in them. It's quite ridiculous.
Okay, thanks. Maybe we come back to that 2.3. I've no other speakers on the floor, so we'll go to recommendations. Recommendation 2.1, the methodology of the excuse me, sorry. Members are asked to agree that the methodology for the footway treatment review and the outcomes for implementation in winter 2012-13 as detailed in paragraphs 3.5 to 3.25. Okay, thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, you know, there's been a lot of concerns raised with the officers regarding this and methodology, how it works. I'm not completely, didn't completely understand it when I said, you know, for example, there's 4 schools in one road. that's the third priority, and you've got shops and you've got areas that, you know, that have medical facilities and that haven't got anything on it at all. So I'm not convinced about the methodology about the way this is working yet, unless it is open to members to highlight some of these areas to the officers. It might be better picked up in the you know, the next one, but I think they both go together. If the methodology isn't working properly, as far as I can see, then I don't know how I can agree it. Unless, as I said, it's open, you know, it's still open for amendment and an update in discussions with officers about how it works.
Stephen, you mentioned earlier that you were open to discuss out with the meeting with members who brought up particular issues here. How will you go about, how will you conduct that process?
I think we did something similar with the carriageway treatment routes, and if members want to email in details of areas of concern, if they want to see officers individually over the next couple of weeks, we can arrange for that to happen. And we can look at it in terms of the justification for changing the routes.
I think that came back to committee later on. We understood the financial implication that was there, but I think it was carried on that year. So are you looked to undertake a similar type of process?
Yeah, I think we would probably bring it back to committee. Wouldn't necessarily. I'm suggesting we go into winter with the current treatment routes that we have in the winter service plan we've used over a number of years now, and any changes we would take it at one time, as we did with the carriageway treatment routes, so that we would come back having considered members' requests for detailed areas to be looked at, and look at if there's the need for revisions to treatment plans that we have before you just now.
I suppose it depends if it can be met within budget or not. Councillor Nicholson?
Thank you. I'm just, you know, it's on the methodology. You know, what I'm saying is, if the methodology has been, there's been an oversight in that in certain areas, then I can understand. But I can't marry the two together in different areas. You know, when you have got, you know, you've got a medical facility, you've got a chemist, you've got shops that are, you know, aren't covered the same as in other areas. So it's either an oversight in the way the methodology has been put down, or the methodology doesn't work. So, you know, I don't have an understanding of how you come to some areas in with a different outcome than others. Now, that might be picked up again, as I said. It might have been a mistake. It might have been an oversight in some of the methodology. I don't know, but you know, I'm not convinced that every area has been treated the same under that methodology.
The only way I can see to overcome that is to, on the back of this being implemented, it would have to come back the issues that are raised from members that has been mentioned already. I mean, until it's been implemented, Councillor Ogilvie kind of touched on it earlier, and we actually get the usage, see how it works. How can we actually say doesn't it? And I don't know, unless you've got a proposal which you'd like to actually change.
I would like my concerns noted within the minutes as well, like, regarding that, because as I said, you know, the methodology is there, and it maybe looks okay. I don't know, but if it's not being it's been interpreted in different ways in different areas, I'd like to know that as well.
Okay, thanks for that. So your concerns have been noted in regards to recommendation 2.1. Carol?
Chair, so if I can just interject. Obviously, members are concerned about the process. And again, like any process, we've applied the rules, and it doesn't always come up with the answer that you want. Now, there is concern about that. There are concerns about other areas that haven't been picked up. So I think if we address that with members, we will continue into this current season with our current footway set up, and we'll address all the issues members have. If there's a budget issue with that, then that would be dealt with through the budget development process, and we would then implement the new footway system next season.
Done that, and I'm not going. I could take exception about the way that was phrased there, but it's not what I want. What I want is a methodology that treats everybody the same and that I can see working. And the way it is now, I can't see it being the same in certain areas. So it's not what I want. It's, you know, I want the same for the whole of Dumfries and Galloway.
Yeah, if I could just maybe respond on that. I think the report's kind of set out, it's trying to make a kind of comparison with the methodology that was used for the carriageway treatment routes. And that was much more of a quantitative approach. We could score every individual carriageway, and it was much more kind of robust in terms of the judgments that were made and whether to treat as a primary or a secondary. I think in this process, as we've set out, there isn't that kind of complete data set there. And what we've done has been more of a qualitative approach, and it's been more of a judgment in terms of identifying those communities that should be treated with priority footways, and then within those communities, where there are facilities that should rank as F1, F2, F3 treatment priorities within the winter plan. I think maybe this process just is bringing in an additional level of scrutiny that's useful in terms of local knowledge that there might have been areas where there has been an oversight or a judgment has been made with the team pulling it together in terms of the categorisation of the treatment routes. And that's I think the valid part of the process. We've gone through the methodology that we could have outlined with members in a particular way, and we've received comments back from members on some of the detail, and I think that's all part of that's a valid part of the process in terms of refining other particular areas that we've missed, with health centres, that we haven't captured them all, and I kind of welcome that feedback. We did certainly notice that in terms of the last footway treatment routes, that there were a lot more areas that we were scoring with the facilities for the elderly and the vulnerable and the health centres. So we did pull in a lot more information and picked up in quite a few changes. But I mean, if there's been some of them we've missed, we welcome that level of input.
Chair, that's what I'm saying. I'm not, I'm not against this because I can see some strengths in it. So I can actually see some things better within it. But if it's open to go to officers and that, and maybe tweak it, highlight some of the issues within that, then I can see how it would work better this way. But as long as I believe that some things have been missed out of it, and if that is an open door for people to go and then say, this has been, I feel it's been treated in a different way than others, then I think I'm not against carrying on with this at the moment as an interim.
To me, Councillor Nixon, you're picking up the point that you don't feel that it's been the operational side of it isn't maybe being fulfilled or is being interpreted in the same manner that you would interpret it. But I think the fact that you've been given the chance that you can go to an officer, say, listen, that's not how I see it, this is how I see it, and that'll be taken on board. I'm sure that'll cover that. But obviously, if there's a major fundamental budget pressure, that'll have to be addressed through the budget process that's forthcoming. Carol?
Thank you. There's always a risk when everybody becomes very reasonable that people go away thinking something different. As I understand, okay, yes, it's on tape. So as I understand it, members are being asked to agree a methodology, and what the officers are saying, the way in which the methodology has been applied is not, as I understand it, an absolute science, but basically there's qualitative judgments that have been made. Now, the first issue is, and I think it's what we mean by the interim, our members saying, we'll go with this for the winter of 2012-13. Is that what everybody's saying?
Subject to...
That's the next part, because if there is something that, because members are being advised by officers that we've done it in a qualitative way, perhaps there is something we haven't got as right as we should. Are we actually indicating that we could make a remedy in our scheme for this winter? I think there's a difference between, you use the word interim, Councillor Nicholson, if I can advise. An interim could be somebody hearing that the interim is for winter of 2012-13. So I need to be very clear about what we're saying and whether we're now asking for members just to do an absolute, little bit of a scrutiny, and I mean it would have to apply to all 47 members. We think this is a glaring error that's so big you must address this year. Are we allowing that, or are we saying, no, this is what's going to happen in 2012-13? So if I can just be clear, because I've got to minute it, and I know it's on tape, but words can come out strange even on a tape.
My interpretation of that will be it's got to be subject to a budget a budget, a maximum budget aligned to that. Because if it comes back, it's £1 million to address. That £1 million just isn't sitting there. So in the interim, it is for this year, as you've indicated, subject to the financial pressure that it has on the budget allocated. If it's implemented this year, then that justifies next year for it to come back to us in the form of a report for it to be adopted at that stage. With then budget aligned to that. Councillor Smith.
Is it too much to ask that, not the next meeting, because I think we've got one next week, but that members be given an opportunity to speak to officers about any changes in their ward, and then we get an update report at the next available meeting, and then that will include any, I mean, for example, there's one in mind, which is right outside Greyfriars Church. It looks like about 10 yards of road that's been missed. That's not going to cost £1 million, basically, if that's fixed, basically. So I think we've got to, I mean, I think the methodology makes sense. I think there are loopholes in it. I think the Eastriggs loophole was the one that was highlighted because of the GP surgery, but that's been resolved. And it sounds to me as if we could accept this, that all members, all 47 members, be given the opportunity to feed in, and then let's wait to see what the feed-in is. If the feed-in is £1 million, then basically we've got an issue. If it's minor tweaks that can be managed within the proposals, then we haven't got a problem. But I think we probably need quite a quick report back, and members be given a short period of time to feed in their views on it. But go with this at the moment, but then give members an opportunity, and then let's see what the consequence of that is.
I'll just ask Councillor Smith that we put a time limit on that that amount of time, whether it's 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever it is, where we can come, all 47 members can come back, put forward their points, and obviously we allow enough time before it comes back to committee that financial cost can be worked up. So I suppose for the two officers sitting, we need to be aware that you can bring back a report quick enough, depending on the level of representation that comes back, obviously, and that you're able to work up the financial cost or burden it might well be to the council.
What we can do, I mean, the next opportunity, I think, to bring back a report is probably January, in terms of the committee cycle for Planning, House and Environment Services. And certainly in that time scale, we could take on board, we could consult with the 47 members on the report, and we could take on board the issues that are raised, and then assess whether there should be variations where members have raised issues, and bring that back, as we did with the carriageway treatment routes. We brought that back to the January committee. In terms of whether it's implemented or not, that, you know, there's maybe a judgment to be made there, whether it's operationally possible. But part of my concern is that we have a certain amount of additional cost associated with these treatment routes here. Once we start to push that up, as well as a budget pressure, it becomes an operational pressure for DG First, in that potentially, as we say that we're going to treat more, say, F1 routes, and by 10:30 is the time limit within the plan, the potential is that we start to harm, or we start to cut back on delivery of other parts of the service. And really what we've got is the routes optimised in relation to what DG First can deliver. Going too much more in terms of delivering more routes, we'd probably be looking at some sort of external contract, maybe a standby contract. And there, the downside of that would be we would be paying a contractor to be on standby through mild winters as well as severe winters. So there is a bit of an issue with how much more we can add into the system, and it's managed efficiently by DG First in terms of the service delivery.
Are we okay then to put a 3-week timeline on that, subject to a report then coming back? 3-week timeline for the members to have input, and a report will come back to the January meeting, and we can take a decision at that point. Councillor Nicholson?
Yeah, I think every member, every one of the 47 members should be emailed with, you know, the proposals.
We'll come back to that and see we'll capture that as we move on. So 2.2, sorry. A revision of the winter service operations plans to provide clarity in the manner in which our council will prioritise and undertake footway treatment as detailed in paragraphs 3.27 to 3.31. Okay. Right, okay, agreed, and picking up the points that Councillor Geddes raised earlier in regards to Newton Stewart. And 2.3, the continuation of the winter service community resilience projects to supplement our council's footway treatment routes. I agree, but how will we actually promote that? And that's going back to what Councillor Ogilvie picked up earlier. How will we promote that and make sure that community councils, and there's not just community councils, there's other small constituted bodies, I think it's only over five members of the public committee forms that body. How make sure we can promote that in a proper manner?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we're looking at in terms of making sure that through our community safety, emergency planning colleagues in terms of community resilience, that contact's been made again with all the appropriate groups to make sure that they're aware that that offer is there to be taken up.
Thanks for that. Councillor Mayo?
And can we have an assurance that the equipment this time is fit for purpose? Because I know several of them that really could not use it because they took the big barrow instead of the small one and it wouldn't handle the salt in the sand.
I think, and maybe if I understand what the problem was there, we had initially, we'd sent out equipment which was quite large and probably not suitable for some people with physical maybe challenges, and that's been revised in terms of it's much smaller equipment and easier to manoeuvre. I think as well what we're planning to do this year in terms of we've had equipment out over the last couple of years. I think it's probably an opportune time for us to recontact all those people and see if they have issues with maintenance on the equipment, ask them to check, just remind them of the kind of safety issues in terms of using the equipment themselves, and for them to get back to us if there's problems with maintenance that we need to address.
Thank you. Carol, can I ask you to pick up on the relevant points, please?
Thank you. If we turn first of all to the first recommendation, and if I try and interpret the sense of what I picked up from your debate, in effect, I think all members have agreed that the methodology for the footway treatment review, so that there's universal agreement and acceptance of that methodology. You're also accepting, if you like, as the starting point, the outcomes of the implementation in 2012-13, as detailed in the report. However, you're also accepting the advice and the manner in which the view of officers that they've done is they've done a qualitative assessment and judgment on the basis of the information they have and the application of that methodology. And we'll now be emailing all 47 members with a report and asking then that members come back where they feel that there may well be a very marked, perhaps inconsistency or misinterpretation in respect of the way in which the methodology has been applied. That will then be reviewed by officers, and where it is something that is immediate, makes sense to remedy within budget, we will end up having a way forward on that. Where we start to see a whole raft of changes which may actually either hit the ability to resource or even deliver, that will then come back and be subject to report in January. So we're looking for whatever we can do to improve it and make sure the best it is within the resources we have, but we will then be asking all 47 members to come back, and the total comments will come back in January. But what we do have within 2.1 is an agreed plan to make happen, to start happening. So I think the snow and ice is going to be with us probably tomorrow. Very positive. And in respect of 2.2, we've agreed the revision. 2.3, we're just picking up the issues from members about making sure that there isn't a duplication and that the equipment that's issued is fit for purpose, and that there is we continue to promote the scheme.
I think maybe we should put a timeline on the motor. 3 weeks, yep. Absolutely. 3 weeks in. Okay, we okay with that? Thanks very much. Item number 12 is member attendance at annual planning conveners meeting. Do we have anything to add to this report?
For homologation.
I'll take questions of the floor and I'll probably comment to add at the end.
Just out of interest, why did this report not appear on the agenda at the meeting that should have taken place in September? Obviously it didn't take place, but this wasn't on the agenda then, so why was it not on the agenda then? Where we could have potentially had a decision, but it wasn't on the agenda then. We were told today's agenda would be the same as the last one. This appears to have been slipped in somewhere along the line. Presumably we knew about this conference a long time ago.
I think it explains in 1.2 that by virtue of the fact that the last committee was stood down, a decision is required to enable it to come.
It's come back now. So it wasn't actually on the agenda. If you look at the papers of the September meeting, it wasn't actually on the agenda, so we can't blame that last committee meeting unless somebody was planning on dumping a late paper on us. It certainly wasn't on the agenda that I looked at yesterday. So why was it not on the agenda then?
I think, in fact, that was the case, Councillor Smith. I think we were going to ask the Chair to circulate a late paper because the information came in and the arrangements came in very late in association with the 4th of September date. So I think that was the case. So I stand corrected. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
I have to admit, I'd forgotten that it was got to be added on at the end. So I'm sure it was a late paper. Get that absolutely clarified if you want. But something I was going to, when I was there, it was myself that attended, and I would ask all members, I think all 47 members, I'll get asked the same question, certainly group leaders to ask their groups. I spoke to John McGurney, who's now the Chief Planner for Scotland, replaced Jim McKinnon, and he's quite willing and quite happy actually, quite keen to come down and do a seminar for us, particular development management performance and how we can help improve that. I've mentioned it to the Head of Planning Services, so hopefully that's something that all groups will take up on. Planning of that sometime maybe in December time, maybe January. Other than that, it's here for homologation. It's already been carried out. So it's saying that recommendation members are asked to agree to the attendance of the chair should we have the Plan House Environment Committee at the annual Planning Conveners meeting to be held in Glasgow on the 4th, 5th of October. And if you want, I can send a brief note out to what actually took place and what came from that. Item number 13 is it any other business? We have no further business. So we'll move on to item number 14, is where we'll ask any members of the public, which I don't think we have any here. And we take a resolution to exclude the public first. And
thank you, Chairman. Just to add to your procedures, obviously in excluding the public, we now must turn off formally both the recording and also the audiovisual system. So if you can just give a minute or so we can allow the technology to work, and hopefully then we'll ensure that the meeting is.
Thank you. Thanks very much. 2 minutes.